But anyway, Farethius requested this. This is called Targeting the City, Debates and Silences About the Aerial Bombing of World War II by Charles S. Maier. And this is in the International Review of the Red Cross. So, this is an ethics paper on World War II strategy. And you can, I don't know if you can, you probably can't read it, but Charles S. Maier's Leverett Saltonstall Professor of History at Harvard University. So, it's a history paper, really, on an ethical topic. So, it's cool. But here we go. And so, as always, feel free to ask questions. And afterwards, we'll give it a review. And it'll show up on, site, which I'm stumping for. So, we have the Philosophy Roulette review. This is the about. You can check out. And we'll have the rankings up soon. So, they'll look something like this. So, you'll have a little bit of name, abstract, review. And then we'll have what we think about it soon enough. So, here we go. Let me know. At what age am I supposed to become interested in World War II? It still hasn't happened yet. I know. Isn't that ain't that the truth there, Vipers? Ain't that the truth? Yeah. Next year, Vipers, always one more year. You were arguing that dropping the atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima was a war crime by the U.S. Oh, yeah. We killed civilians. But I think that's what we're discussing here. So. Took you a second. Of course, World War II has happened. Oh, Ivan, you're such a, sweet soul. The moral issue in context. For many years, the debates on the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki obscured the debate on the conventional bombings during and even before the Second World War. A certain tacit consensus prevailed, namely that the German bombings of Madrid in the autumn of '36, of Guernica, of Warsaw and Rotterdam, the London Blitz, and the bombing of Coventry, which gutted St. Michael's Cathedral and destroyed the center of the city, were acts of wanton terror designed primarily to terrorize populations, whereas the subsequent, more destructive Allied attacks on Italian, German, and then Japanese urban centers, including the massive 1945 assault on Tokyo that may have taken 100,000 to 125,000 lives, waged with hundreds of planes that could carry far heavier bomb loads, were legitimate military actions, with Dresden perhaps an exception. Okay. Guys are arguing about, war stuffs. Alright, the heavy attacks on northern French cities and towns in 1944, far more destructive than the German air raids in 1940, have also been largely accepted as a legitimate part of the war effort. Bamboozled, yeah. To be sure, the German attacks were condemned because even if the German war effort might be deemed legitimate, though usually considered such only by Germans, the Luftwaffe's bombings often seemed gratuitous and excessive, designed just to terrorize and demoralize civilian populations. The attack on the Basque city served little military purpose, and victory was already at hand when Warsaw and Rotterdam were bombed. Okay. But what about the Allied air raids? Even if they were possibly as violent as the German attacks, they were often defended as a necessary means to a worthy end. In short, for a long time, most post-war debate about the means used was subordinate to consideration of the ends to be obtained. Allied victory was a worthy end that justified the very means condemned when used in the service of an Axis victory, an unworthy end. Yeah, so this is, our side had to win, so we had to do some shitty things. You have to, break a few eggs, kill a few people in order to win the war. What has happened, of course, is that the said debate, which has seemed to be quiescent for so long, ooh, wow, quiescent, haven't seen that in a while, has now resurfaced. This article is concerned with both the context of the debate and the issues involved. By the very nature of the subject, it must include an analysis of moral questions as well as a historical account. Yeah, so again, this is by a history professor talking ethics, which is cool. But, one thing I will say, and this is not a academic philosophy journal. I don't know what the status of, the International Red Cross, whatever review is. But this is so much easier to read. It's not so hard. It's not less tripping on words for me, at least. Okay. Actually, the discussion about means is a twofold debate, though often a rather muddled one. War is an evil and is recognized as such, but there are lesser and greater evils, and there has been general agreement in the West that the evil of war should be kept to a minimum. This imposes limitations on recourse to war, jus ad bellum, yes, and on the waging of a war once it is deemed necessary, jus in bello. So this is, I remember Irish talking about this because I don't know this ethics, because it's what are the reasons to go to war, and then how is it to wage an ethical war? So, yeah. You got the army figurines. Yeah, they were cool. Okay, the concept of necessity is usually the license for resorting to war and employing means in warfare that are harmful, but necessity remains a subjective standard. And even necessity has in some cases been ruled out by international agreement as an excuse for bringing harm to civilians, although such agreements are often not honored. Rethia says, the pilots and strategists didn't think so, and that's what I'm fascinated with. Yeah, I mean, as per usual, the people fighting the war are not the ones who decide to go to war. It's very rare that you get like the king leading the army anymore. You have people like the politicians sitting back safe in America when they send, why do they always send the poor? It's like they're sending the poor. They're not sending their people. They're sending other people. War involves a means-ends calculation in several ways. Just war doctrine suggests both that recourse to war and the conduct of a war already decided upon must meet certain criteria. Waging war cleanly will nevertheless cause death and destruction, and so recourse to war, codified as jus ad bellum, must be a last resort, undertaken only if the good achieved can outweigh the harm that will ensue. In the second sphere, war is limited by an imposing constraint on the conduct of hostilities, that is, by observing jus in bello. Do I agree with the what? What's the exact reference of the that there, Rethius? Excuse me. At the heart of these constraints are two major moral priorities. First, preservation of the distinction between civilians and military combatants. Second, and again as in the case of recourse to war, the invocation of proportionality as a standard to be met. The harm done should not be disproportionate to the good supposedly achieved. The two sphere that I just read, that there's reasons to go to war like justifications, and then once you're in the war, there's things that shouldn't be done. That's a good question. I don't know, to tell you the truth. I have not thought, I'm not an ethical thinker. I do not think about this stuff very often, so I'll have to, think about it for a sec. It seems like there are two decisions to be made. First, why should we go to war, and then what should we do when we go to war? But of course, they're tied together. If you're going to say, look, I'm going to go do something nasty, I have to have a reason to go do something nasty, because war's nasty. Then there's limits to even the nasty things that I will do. So it's like there's two steps. Will I start to do mean things, and then what's the limit of the mean things I will do? And that does seem like a reasonable distinction, that even if I agree to do certain things, I might not do everything. Now, is there a tipping point where it stops being there is no end to the mean things I will do, like to protect my life and my family? The rest of it is a crapshoot. Yeah, and then you rationalize after the fact. Exactly, Rethius. You're like, well, I had to protect my life. I could do what do you expect me to do? And then you get into all the discussions. Well, how threatened were you really? And then you have to say, well, I don't know, but I felt threatened and stuff like that. Like, it's fine to psychologically torture your partner, but you can't smack them. Yeah, why do we do things like that? Why do we assume, why are we allow shooting people on TV, but not sex? What is the difference between it's okay to kill people or in certain things, but you can't do psychological torture in certain things, and then other times it seems fine to drive someone insane, and then other times it's not. I remember Shane saying when they were gaslighting people in Nazi Germany, they would go into people's houses, move things around. He said it fucked them up for decades, because they stopped believing their reality, and you couldn't get it back to them where they were trusting their reality when you were fucking with their heads. And so it's some of those things are so damaging. So we don't have a good handle on this. This is not even it might be a little bit controversial to say, but a lot of philosophers do not like psychology. It's the foundations of psychology are very difficult to parse. Now, of course, psychologists are doing good work out there and all that, but it's very hard to really get a solid foundation. If you're doing physical science, that's one thing, but the mental science is very, very difficult. And so, of course, we've got cognitive science and doing all sorts of stuff, but it's difficult. So the idea, that we can even quantify what we're doing at certain times, like psychological torture, it's muddles the water, muddies the water, everything is muddled. And so it makes it easier to make excuses at that point. And people love that. They love a little bit of haze. They love a little bit of ambiguity. Like, oh, I didn't know it was so bad. Now, killing people, it's bad. Don't do that. But the question is, I guess, then does this distinction do exactly that? Is the decision to go to war really that different from the decision to just like torture people? And are you just trying to justify it at that point? Like, I was just in coming to the war, and then once we got in, we realized we had to do worse things than we expected. Maybe that is a way to, like, you know, justify what you're saying. Yeah. I think I'm with Retheus on that, Tindarios. When you're in war, it's whenever you're actually doing something, it's different from the abstract. Like, a lot of people in philosophy, they talk about abstract shit and they don't know what they're talking about. And that's when you get the people just shaking their heads like, you don't know what you're talking about, you stupid philosophers. You've got your head in the clouds, you're not looking at like the actual practice on the ground. So yeah. You think it changes your thoughts? Yeah. If like people you see are dying, it's very different than, you know, in abstract, how would you feel about this? So there was I thought about this recently. I don't know why, but one of the MMA fighters caught someone allegedly to have who allegedly basically raped one of his family members, and you know the cops caught this guy because he beat the hell out of him. Maybe he killed him. I don't even know. So the MMA fighter caught up to someone who allegedly raped one of his family members, and he caught the guy and beat the fuck out of him, maybe killed him. And Dana White, the head of the UFC, said, you know, all of us have said that we would do exactly what this man did if we were in his position. So it's like, just leave it alone. It's like, yeah, that guy got put into a situation saying, I would do anything to defend my family, happened, and he did it. And it's like, well, every one of them have said the exact same words. So it's like, who's to criticize here? I don't know, but it's like, we have a justice system that is supposed to take care of these things. But when it actually happens to you, it's like, well, I don't know at that point. Yeah. Well, you mean like active wars? Well, I don't know if anyone here is actively at war. Like, I know I have website hits from Ukraine. I don't know if any of them are watching me on the front lines. It's going to be different if you are actually firing guns. Like, I know I've got hits in Russia. Like, I don't know what the status of, like, the internet is, like, all over the world for Twitch. But it's like, I know I have website hits from various parts in the world. So it's like, there could be active combatants watching this stream right now. It's possible. Yeah. So, of course, it makes a difference that there are wars, but I mean, it's pretty far away from me here in New York, and I expect it's far away from a lot of other people, yeah. And lucky enough not to have to be experiencing it. Okay. But it's a good question. Is the distinction of going to war and then what you do when you're in the war already making it, giving you sort of like an apologetics for, you know, getting out? I expect someone's asked that question before too. I just don't know what the answer is. I suspect that there is some wiggle room. You say, well, I got in with the best of intentions. Yeah, and you've heard that before. Oh, I got in with the best of intentions. It's like, that doesn't really fucking matter sometimes. Like what your intentions were at the beginning. You're right here now, and you have to do something about it. It's like no one gives a fuck about your intentions at that point. So, yeah. Okay, so yeah, at the heart of these constraints are two major moral priorities. First, preservation of the distinction between civilians and military combatants. Second, and again, as in the case of recourse to war, the invocation of proportionality. Again, so like, what are you allowed to do? As a standard to be met, the harm done should not be disproportionate to the good supposedly achieved. Now, I have to just yell at this author once. This is they should have put a period here, because this is one sentence from this at to achieved, and then they basically restarted a sentence with a colon, semicolon, then another colon. Come on, man. Okay, an aggrieved state should not go to war lightly, and once engaged in war, it should not employ a level of violence disproportionate to the provocation. Conversely, many military men, such as General Sherman, have cogently argued that harsh measures used in waging war make war more unlikely. Yeah. So this is the converse thing, and I think this is where we're going, is that like the fact that you are ruthless in war makes people not want to fight you. Oh yeah, yes, that's very true. That we can, Tindera says, I meant that we can talk about current wars in a different way than the ones which have passed since decades. For example, we don't know the outcome yet. We can guess. Yeah, and wars now, of course, we're using different tech. Things are a little weird now with all the drones that we didn't have before. So even warfare is different. You've got people that could be sitting in like different parts of the world, targeting civilians with drones. It's like things that we couldn't do a long time ago. We can do now. So, but I'm sure they were doing stuff before, but this is slightly different. Got our own twist on things. All right. However, many measures in war also ran foul of the other underlying moral priority laid down for the conduct of war, the distinction to be made between combatants and civilians, and by extension, the distinction between combatants and not yet disarmed and those rendered harmless by capture or injury. Hey, Intensity John, what's up? Sitting in a C can with an Xbox controller. You know, absolutely. And I have to say that I hate that Xbox controllers are getting beaten up on this. Those things, they switched to those because the ones that they were using before were worse. So it's like you sit in a C can, but the Xbox controller has to be good for like 1 million button presses, and it's like super accurate. Those have more R&D than probably the old military controllers do. So, I mean, think about how many people an Xbox controller has to work for, and how many complaints Microsoft has gotten and like iterated on. Same with the PlayStation controller and all that. So it's like, yeah, you're sitting in a C can with an Xbox controller, and I know it's a joke, but like I feel bad. Like it's actually a really good solution to use an Xbox controller. How many people they've killed? Yeah, exactly. How many people they've killed in cyberspace, and how many actual people they kill? It's like, yeah. So weird times when like you're actually killing people with your video game controller. All right. In brief, do not kill civilians. Wow, shocking. In brief, do not kill civilians and do not murder prisoners of war or the wounded. The question of killing soldiers clearly bent on mass retreat is more of a gray zone. The American air attacks on the disabled and fleeing columns of the Iraqi army in the 1991 Gulf War caused some qualms here, but not such as to become a major theme of discussion in the United States. Americans do not really believe themselves capable of war crimes. Yeah, like we always think here in the U.S., we're on the moral high ground here. We don't actually believe themselves capable of war crimes. It's like, why would you even say that? When they do occur, they remain the exception that proves the rule. Yeah, that was a mistake. We didn't mean to do that. Intentional destruction of civilian property has also been condemned, but far less intensely. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those. The people in charge, they know. Like, of course they know. Like, this is like a thing in war forever. You can destroy people's stuff, and then they can't come back because there's no food. They can't farm or whatever. It's bad. Yeah, that's the point in there. Is they even use military warships. That's exactly what we do. They switched over to Xbox controllers because they found out that the recruits already knew how to use them. They used them more efficiently and better than the ones that they were producing themselves, and they had less of a failure rate and were less complicated to maintain and use than the military-based joysticks that they were using. And so it's like, it was a no-brainer, and so they just got a contract with Microsoft, like, which is already a military subcontractor, and it was like, this is like a perfect solution. The Xbox controllers cost like, $50, $100, even $200 compared to the thousands of bucks, and maybe tens of thousands that the like military grade like subcontractors were charging to make their controllers. It's not a world war unless it comes from the Brandenburg region in Germany. Otherwise, it's just a sparkling conflict. I was going to say it required like a Serbian to like start it, but like, okay. Like, you need someone from like the Serbia, Austro-Hungarian Empire, like that old area. But like otherwise, yeah. Okay. Although the distinction between civilian and combatant has often been erased, it has been recognized since antiquity. Thucydides narrates how the morality of the Greek armies degenerated in the Peloponnesian War. The Melian dialogue and the repression of the Mytilene suggests that male civilians were deemed to be the least potential soldiers, but remember too how shocking the Thracian attack on Mycalessus appeared when the soldiers sacked the houses and temples and butchered the inhabitants, sparing neither youth nor age. but killing all they fell in with, one after the other, children and women, and even beasts of burden. In particular, they attacked a boys' school, the largest that there was in the place, into which the children had just gone, and massacred them all. Yeah. The sub that sank near the Titanic used an off-brand Xbox controller. Yeah. The question is, do we have any reason to think that it was the controller that like caused the sub to sink and not like structural integrity? Like, this is why I don't like it, because it was actually a brilliant solution using an Xbox controller to like military and like submarine controls, and it's getting all the shit. And it's like, how about you don't go down in like a busted ass tin can? Who cares how it's controlled? Like, I don't think it was the controller's fault. I know it makes a funny joke blaming the Xbox controller, but like, that was actually probably the least busted thing in the thing. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't the controller, but it's funny. So, like, I suspect that was the most tested and most robust piece of equipment on, like, any of this. You know, even in military warships, more people have used Xbox controllers than will have ever used a warship. Like, seriously. It's like the more people have used the Xbox controller probably today, like in terms of hours used, than have ever used in the U.S. military, all right? Like any military warship. So it's like, that's the most secure piece of tech on the entire boat. A Logitech, either way. If it was Logitech either. Logitech is, I fucking love Logitech. It's a great, like I've had really good success with the Logitech stuff. Like I've really liked their peripherals over the years. So it's like, yeah, I'm using a Logitech keyboard right now. It's like, they're good. They went down without portholes. They went down to look at screens of camera captures. Yeah, why go at all? Well, you know, just watching cameras from the surface. There's always something about doing it yourself. You want to go be in a sub. You want to go do it yourself. Like, why do people climb mountains? Well, not just look at the pictures. It's like they want to do it. I understand the impulse. But, like, again, these were rich people fucking around. I don't feel bad for them. But, like, yeah. But I understand the impulse to be like, I want to be the person in the sub. Viper says, when you start streaming again, would anyone be interested in discussion with someone who served on a warship? Why not? That'd be, you know, interesting perspective, what they know about that. Someone famed climbers asked why he climbed a mountain and risked his life and sacrificed his comfort. He said, because it was there. Yeah. People do stuff like, why do I stream philosophy? Seriously. This is like, I do things because I can sometimes. Other people can't. You can search through the internet, and I know people in chat have, trying to find other people doing something similar. One of them, what we found, he's doing it because he saw me doing it. Like, and then there's a handful of other people. It's not this is not the easiest thing to read and interpret in real time. It's like other people can do it, but it's like, it's not going to happen otherwise. Yeah. Okay. So, Tacitus annals are filled with such accounts, and slaughter after overcoming a besieged city remained commonplace way into the 30 Years' War of the 17th century. Still, it was generally recognized as wrong in some fundamental way, and that recognition lay at the basis of what was claimed to be natural law, or developed as international law. 18th century theory and practice in Europe attempted to reimpose the firewall between civilians and combatants, though not without some military men complaining that this just increased the likelihood of war. Yeah, we were reading a paper a while back on just war theory, and they were saying, look, you're attacking the infrastructure. The people are producing the economy that supplies the military. So how do you separate the economy from the military when the economy is what's paying the military to be able to go to war? Like, if you fuck up the economy, which is technically civilians, then you are, you know, indirectly affecting the war effort. So really, why do you separate the economy from the war? Or is that just playing into rich people's hands because they don't want you to mess up their money? Yeah, the argument goes all the way back. Looks like it. But yeah, so that was what I remember from the last paper, when it's like, why can't you fuck with someone's economy? Because if that stops the war. There was another guy who asked why he was climbing a mountain. He replied, to hug the mountain, to envelop that mountain. He wants to make love to the mountain. Tough young guys, sinewy bodies, and yet fingers and teeny toes challenging the rock, challenging death. Why do I climb the mountain? Because I'm in love. Yeah. So why people do things is not like, it's not obvious. If you have like the very sort of boring answer, oh, like to make money, have a family, have a very narrow view of like human life, then yeah. But like we do stuff not like all that stuff is good. Like don't get me wrong, but like you can do other things too. It's not like you're limited to just the narrow view of human life. So yeah. Yeah, you can do weird things. Like there's a lot of like I'm not one of these, oh, you can do anything. You can't do anything. You can do some crazy fucked up weird shit. And like it might be impressive, it might be bad, but like you can do some really weird stuff out there. So yeah. I think people do stuff to leave something behind when they die. Yeah, a lot of people do stuff for their legacy. I mean, other people, you know, they want to have like one of these, like go off and like have a mystical life. They may not think that they're leaving anything behind, but they want to, you know, be at one with the universe. Like, and so they can like, why they go, you know, go for like a walkabout, like the like out in the Australian outback, or you know, they go off and live by themselves for many years out in the woods, things like that. It's like they don't have to think they're leaving something behind, but like you can even have other reasons. Like you just want to like feel the universe, feel the world, see what it is like in a different way than just modern society you know, imposes on, or has not even impose, it does impose, but like that just modern society provides. Like Ivan was just saying, like, you know, what sort of economy do we have, what sort of jobs are expected of you? Like really, who out there has like the job that they really like? I mean, some of us, not me, but like yeah, it's like I'd rather just not, I don't want to do shit. I don't really want to do shit. Like, I like doing whatever I do and then, like, nothing else. Like, I don't want to work. Who wants to work? All right, the issue has become more difficult in modern times, however, in that modern weapons technology has once again tended to erase the distinction between civilians and soldiers. But the blurring has occurred, so to speak, on both sides. On the one hand, the new weaponry has made it harder to limit casualties and destruction. Yeah, read this. You have a job you like well enough. That's great. Like you can like your work. I never was like I never have found anything. I was like I want to do this. Nah, like I'm going to sit around and, like, you know, read shit, write some articles, like, whatever. Yeah. Yeah, like so. But again, society's going to function as long as it does provide, you know, for a lot of people in society to have halfway decent lives. And I like civilization. It's like that was something I completely agree with Ivan earlier today. I like civilization. I am concerned that, like, you know, civilization could get worse in some sense and like be degraded, and people have a shittier lives in the future going forward. Like they always say that, like, basically the quality of life has not gone up for like my generation of people. Like I'm an elder millennial, and our like quality of life is not better than our parents' quality of life. Like it's kind of leveled off or gone down, and I see that. So it's like, I like civilization. I am concerned about that sort of thing. Now, what do? Like, I stream philosophy on Twitch. But as Aris was saying last stream, he says, if you're looking for actual academic, like, commentary, this is one of the only places online you can get it. So, yeah. Yeah, geriatric millennial, exactly. So, elder millennial, baby. And I've only gotten like a little lucky. I only have a little bit to my name, but like I'm not broke. I can still pay for my beer. But like it'd be nice if I wasn't like otherwise. Like it'd be nice to be rich, as it's always been in history. All right. On the one hand, the new weaponry has made it harder to limit casualties and destruction. The use of submarines and torpedoes in World War I presented this argument in particularly cogent form. For a submarine to give notice of attack would render it highly vulnerable and far less effective. In this situation, the Allies did not contest the fact that it would be impractical for a submarine to surface, ask the passengers or crews of a vessel to take the lifeboat, and only destroy or capture it. They simply said that attacks without warning on ships carrying civilians were unlawful. On the other, there is the German retort that the Allied blockade, formally contrary to the rules of war, which allowed a close blockade at a harbor entrance, but not the interdiction of distant shipping routes, also killed civilians, never had quite the same force, since the effects were indirect and hard to visualize as an immediate consequence. Yeah, so again, if you fuck up the economy, people are going to die. The same disjunction of cause and effect has also attended the debate on economic sanctions against Iraq or other offending governments. Are sanctions that affect a population as a whole justified against dictatorial regimes that supposedly keep their populations in thrall? Z3 says, better to be rich and miserable in your Lamborghini than a bum getting mugged or killed in the streets. If only all people gave away 10% of their income to the poor, the world would be a better place. Yeah, I mean, the idea that we have like these uber wealthy people when we can't like feed or house a lot of our own population here in the United States is embarrassing. It just is. We can't feed people, we can't educate people when we have the money and resources to do so, and it's bad. But yeah, in a capitalist society like we live, I mean, capital, you need money. That's where we're in capitalism at the moment. It's like that's how we are set up. So it's like we could do something else, but we don't at the moment. So like, yeah. And welcome in Z3. What was it? ZZ487. All right. Well, tell me if you have a preferred way to be referenced, Z3. By 1918, moreover, it was evident from the emerging implications of air warfare, especially with the Zeppelin raids over London, that the question of harm to civilians had to be considered. Zeta 87. Okay, Zeta. Ah, I got you. Yeah, see, I couldn't figure out if the 4 was supposed to be elite speak or not. And so I just went with, because it was like Zet or Zeta. Okay, Zeta 87. Cool. In view of the issues raised by aerial bombings, yeah, and welcome in anyone who like is new here anyway. I'm Noah, Noger, No Gray, No Gray, whatever you want to call me. We talk philosophy here, read stuff, discuss, and then we review it at the end. Let me know if you have any questions along the way. This is not an ask me anything. I lose words when I'm streaming. I retain the right to not answer your fucking question if I don't feel like it. It's whatever, but I try to figure out what is going on and tell you what I think. Okay. In view of the issues raised by aerial bombing, in general, debate has often centered not on the degree to which military necessity might justify harm done to civilians, but on the question whether military necessity really came into play. Why not what, Vipers? Why I don't answer any questions? I just reserve the right not to. I can tell you to fuck off. I'm just reserving the right to tell people to fuck off. That's about it. In other words, even if the issue of taking civilian casualties in one's stride were suspended, might not victory be possible without such cruelties? Debate on use of the Hiroshima bomb, and even more so on the Nagasaki bomb, has usually focused on the question of their necessity to end war. I don't know what all the whys are in reference to. Why? If they're all directed at me, that is. Was either needed to compel the Japanese to surrender. At least did those advocating the use of the bomb believe it was needed to bring about their surrender without a great loss of American lives. Was the second bomb equally necessary? Might a greater interval between them have been allowed? But a major reason that civilians have become or became a target is, of course, that modern technology makes civilians instrumental in warfare. The growing dependence of warfare on society as a whole, especially the role of laboring in arming a nation, rendered the civilian combatant distinction questionable. Modern warfare was so dependent on war production at sites far away from the fighting that the concept of a front line tended to seem irrelevant. Okay, so yeah, this is the economic one. Okay. We are Socratic Pokemons. We can't say more. Ah, I gotcha. And it's something you agree with. Interesting. Yeah, so this is the thing. War production at sites far away from the fighting. That there is no front line. Yeah. Surely a belligerent nation was entitled to destroy the industrial capacity of its adversary, since that seemed such an integral part of the military effort. But was it entitled to attack the civilians who worked in such production facilities? Viper says, according to Shane, there was no pressing strategic reason to use the bomb. The generals were just itching to use it. I was there for that. I was thinking about that too. So, I mean, of course, I don't know the history, but yeah. I mean, apparently, according to a historian we know, Shane McGinnis, we do not, this was not actually a necessity here. Okay, as is well known, the doctrine of collateral damage was first put forward among British air strategists to cope with this issue. Civilian casualties had to be accepted as a byproduct of attacks on physical plant on a physical plant used for war production or even related civilian production. Warfare. If God removed all our weapons, would we start using sticks and rocks to kill each other? You don't even need sticks and rocks, Zeta. You can use your fists. We've been doing that for even longer. I mean, yeah, like of course we would. I mean, God did not stop, in your little theory here, God did not stop humans from being assholes. We're still assholes. So whatever God you deem, whatever God you will that it would be then. No earlier dilemma had required the same splitting of hairs. Yeah, so this is new. This is, even when you were indiscriminately firing into a crowd, you at least kind of knew that the crowd was like military when you were on the battlefield. But now when you're dropping bombs from the air, you just don't know. When I put on my makeup, he can kill us with the look. Yeah, I turned to Medusa. That's correct. Well, that was what we're just saying. They had to make up words, Zeta. This is the first time they had to make up words about it because of they were dropping bombs on factories and they had no idea who they were hitting. And so this is the whole point. They had to make up a word to make themselves feel less bad about it. No earlier dilemma had required the same splitting of hairs. In the Peninsular War of the early 19th century and the Franco-Prussian War of the 1870 to 71, the issue of non-uniformed guerrillas had arisen. The Prussian military insisted that such guerrillas or franc-tireurs lost any protection to which captured combatants were entitled as prisoners of war and could be executed out of hand. Subsequent conferences in Geneva and The Hague attempted not to shield the irregular soldier as such, but to establish guidelines for differentiating legitimate militia forces from the franc-tireur, essentially by insisting on some visible insignia and the open, not concealed carrying of weapons. We used to be more honest with words. Now we try to make it sound less bad than it is. I don't think we were any more honest in the past. I have no reason to think that. I think that's a rose-colored glasses looking at history. We have more tech, so we have to talk about different things now. But I don't think... I mean, you can look at the history. We were just as nasty to each other, if not more nasty in the past. So I don't know if we were honest about it. I mean, we used to just kill people. We call them heathens. Like they weren't human because they weren't Christian or something. Or they weren't the right religion. And so then it was okay to kill them. Like, all right, we had words in the past making it okay to kill people. Call them a heathen, then they can die. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, Retius. The franc-tireurs were not civilians. They were more akin to spies who also did not announce their presence and thus could rightfully be executed on discovery. It is always a problem with your spy. If you get caught as your spy, you're fucked. Because like they may deny your being a spy and then you're really fucked. Because then you're just some guy doing very illegal stuff. Not even guy, some whatever you are. You're nothing at that point. Not surprisingly, hard-bitten commanders in such wars often took action without undue precision, and in 1914 the fear of franc-tireurs led to massive German atrocities in Belgium. In World War II, however, a guerrilla fighter became a partisan deserving of recognition as a combatant in the eyes of his British or American allies, but meriting execution in the eyes of the occupying force. Since some German commanders resorted to civilian reprisals as well as executions of captured partisans, Field Marshal Kesselring in Italy was a notable example of such action on a Western front. This issue soon eclipsed even the fate of partisans. After World War II, new guidelines drafted in 1949 extended similar protections to resistance fighters, and in recent decades, even paramilitary fighters have asked for similar recognition. There was a really spy in Spain that worked for the UK and fooled the Nazis to say he was a spy of theirs. Don't know. I don't know. History and geography are like some of my least, I know the least about. I know a bunch about philosophy, but ethics is not one of my specialties either, so this is a little out of my wheelhouse. Nonetheless, reprisal policy remains at the heart of guerrilla war because it seems to emerge from that necessity which, despite all their conventions, continues to be the underlying justification of violence. Guerrilla warfare, as practiced by World War II partisans and perfected in post-war colonial struggles, deliberately involved the civilian base and drew on its resources. It was a war either to recruit by conviction or coercion civilian support for the partisan cause or to make such support too costly. The theory of guerrilla warfare, which French authorities zealously studied from Chinese and Viet Minh writings, basically urged the distinction between the people and the army be erased. Yeah, I'm a spy for kick. Yeah, I am actually I'm streaming on Kick now too. I don't think anyone's there, but that's cool. If anyone shows up, it's cool. I want to, have like not have a fallback plan, but I want to support the competitor here because Twitch always needs a competitor, or else it will, I think it will just degrade over time if it does not have someone to worry about. And hey, there we go. Tyndaris is also on Kick as well. But yeah, it needs competition to keep this sort of space innovating. Otherwise, I feel it will just stagnate. And so there's YouTube as well, but YouTube has its own problems, and I don't need a stump for Google or Alphabet or whatever the fuck they call themselves. So I'm supporting the crypto bros, which I feel creepy about. Yeah, secret party over in Kick. Don't talk about it. Yeah, so I'm supporting crypto bros at the moment. I feel less scummy than supporting Amazon or Google doing that. It is the co-involvement of civilians that unites the issue of guerrilla or partisan warfare with that of aerial bombardment. Zato says, this is no joke. I'm serious. Does the military use Arma 3 and simulation video games to train real soldiers? Yes, they do. I don't know what games they do, but they use video game simulations, yes. Like 1 hour a day, pure tactical shooting. I don't know any... I don't know much about military training. Not at all, really. Maybe just a little bit of stuff. But I know that they have used video games as training tools. They definitely do, Retheus, have privately designed video games that they use for training. I saw some YouTube video where it was being demonstrated, and, it was basically like a Call of War, Call of Duty or whatever, like thing. But, it was like customized maps so that they could show things on like the maps were designed to their uses. ARM is one? Okay. Well, there we go, Eudaimonia. So, yeah. Thank you, Eudaimonia, for bringing the smarts. Okay. So this is interesting. I had no idea the history of like this theorizing between guerrilla warfare and like military bombardment, because from one side the military aerial bombardment couldn't tell who was a civilian and who wasn't, and guerrilla warfare also blurs the line between who's a fighter and who isn't. Viper says there was a game developed by the U.S. Army called that's the one I saw, America's Army, which was technically a war crime since it's illegal under international law to target kids for recruitment. Yeah, I think they were using America's Army to train people, and then they released it, and that was like, don't do that. Good old US. Like, and when we do war crimes, oops, it's always oops, we didn't know. Yeah, you played that game. There we go. Still, there were differences. After all, partisans acted with putative intent to kill or wound. They took to the field or to the forest. But what were the rights and wrongs of bombing civilians and their families who merely took to the factories? Bombing did not introduce this issue. Bombardment had originated with shelling, and the British had made famous the idea in 1806 of Copenhagening. Oh, that's great. Just blowing up Copenhagen? That is the naval bombardment of a neutral city. You played that game, landed in the games jail? By the end of World War I, however, the possibilities of bombing were recognized and doctrines for its use had to be developed. Another Hague conference in 1923 contributed draft rules for aerial bombardment that would have prohibited the bombardment of civilian populations, quote, not in the immediate neighborhood of land forces. Okay, so you can blow people up, but like they have to be close to the forces. They incurred objections and were never ratified, although clearly on the table as guidelines whose rejection had to be argued for. Neville Chamberlain in 1938 and American Air Force generals through much of the war seemed to express sympathy with the sense of restraint, although in 1944 American practice seemed as ruthless as that of the British. Turns out you land in jail if you shoot the instructor in the game. Yeah, see, training material. You can do that in like video games. You can't do that in real life. You're getting yourself in jail. Shelling the shit out of Copenhagen from the port. Yeah, it's pretty crappy. Most other games just don't let you damage those NPCs. I've been watching, like, just a lot of the people I watch play Souls games, and apparently in, like, Dark Souls and all those, you can kill NPCs and get into fights with them. So that's part of the game. So, like, like, you can develop stuff like that. Yeah. British advocates of the new weapon, however, did not want to be trammeled. Good word, trammeled. Haven't seen that. Air Marshal Hugh Trenchard's championing of the new war aim, and finally Arthur Bomber Harris' conviction that precisely the bombing of civilian centers would win the war for Britain prevailed over earlier hesitations. In 1928, Trenchard argued that one might seek to terrorize munitions workers, men and women, into absenting themselves from work, but that the indiscriminate bombing of a city for the sole purpose of terrorizing the civilian population was illegitimate. That detail is funny from an outside perspective and intense when you think about why they put that in the game. Yeah. It's like they want to make sure you don't start like turning your guns on like your people that are in control there. How do I imagine our future? Dystopian? Are you optimist or neutral? I'm more I guess I look at like us. We're just going into like that cyberpunk-ish dystopia. It probably won't be as bad as like some of the dystopians are, but I'm more on the things are not like looking that great at the moment side. So yeah. I mean, I have no crystal ball. You go check. We could go. Shane McGinnis. Give him a shout out. Shane McGinnis. He now has a new feature on his stream where you can request a future prediction, and he's a historian, and he will tell you what he thinks of the future. Maybe we're ready in Cyberpunk. Yeah, we're getting there. Like we're getting some of the stuff. We're getting there. So that's kind of how I feel. Shame. But look, we get some of the cool stuff, some of the bad stuff, and a lot of times it's like things aren't always as bad as they seem, or like you can talk about bad things, but like in your local area, it's maybe not so bad. Like people give the U.S. a lot of shit. U.S. is really a nice place to live for the most part. Like, especially here in New York, we're one of the safest places to live in any major city. Like, it's ridiculously safe in New York compared to a lot of other big cities. Like, don't go to fucking New Orleans if you don't like. New Orleans is so dangerous. Oakland, California is so dangerous. Like, a lot of cities are so dangerous compared to New York. It's ridiculous. Do I think? I know they pay the politicians. Like, of course they do. It's America. We've got so much lobbying. It's like, and they have to report that, and it's not even like, I don't think it's even a question at this point that, I mean, it depends what you mean by control, but do they pay off politicians? Like, yeah, the world isn't black and white. Exactly. So it's like, yeah, people definitely have pay to play. When AOC got to Congress, one of the interesting things she did, she started taking like streaming or like taking videos of all the lobbyists that like she met. Like that's what she did. It was like a new job, and you're meeting your coworkers, and all the lobbyists came through, and she was like, showing all the lobbyists and stuff, and no one had ever like publicly shown all the lobbyists that just come and meet all the new politicians and like, here's what we're like, here's who I am and who I work for, and here's the lobbyists. It's like, yeah. Just watch the camera capture from the surface. Okay, I don't know what that pin is, but whatever it is, it's cool. Many politicians resist the influence. We just live in the churn. Yeah, I mean, many do, not all of them. And there's a lot of money. And you also have to realize a lot, like there was the tech bosses like Zuckerberg and like, so from like Facebook Meta and Google and Apple or whatever, they were on Capitol Hill today, and I can't even watch the cringy questions that get asked of them. Like, it's terrible because we have these people who are in politics who are not tech people, and they don't know what the right questions are, and they ask the tech people questions, and like the tech people, they've got like these stock answers they give, and it's completely useless. But you can see, who's this for? Like, who is this for? Like, it's just like performative stuff. It drives me crazy. I don't even watch these things anymore because it's obvious that like all this money and like they have to do something, but like it's just for show. Yeah, an element of predictability, a Tide or smoothie blend. Yeah, they mix it up and they try to do stuff, and and I'm not on the side like, well, you can't do anything about it. You can definitely do stuff about it. It's just hard. It's very, very hard to get anything going. And like the powers that be don't want to get out. They don't want to give up power. They absolutely do not. So, continuing. This distinction proved far too tenuous to retain as a maxim of strategy. That's you can't just terrorize civilian populations. And they were like, but that's not clear. Indiscriminate body for the sole purpose of terrorizing was illegitimate. This distinction would prove far too tenuous to retain as a maxim of strategy. Early in the war, the British moved on to define along Trenchard's lines the idea of collateral damage. Again, this is, we can kill people in some way and call it collateral damage. but collateral damage was the up-to-date version of what the medieval just war doctrine of scholasticism had sanctioned as double effect. Yeah, and you'll hear this other version called double effect. If despite care to minimize civilian casualties, and such care was necessary to render the procedure acceptable, civilians were still injured or killed in order to secure a legitimate military end, and there was no dissent that wiping out enemy industrial capacity was a legitimate objective, this was acceptable within the more general injunction to observe proportionality. Yeah, so it's called double effect because you have to wipe out the military capacity, and that's also going to wipe out some people, but the military capacity is, the main effect, and then there's another effect, a double effect. But so we've just had a shift in terms. But this is like one of those things. There's also a joke in philosophy that if you really think you've done something, a lot of times there's like some medieval that came up with it already. We haven't paid attention to them enough yet. Proportionality, it should be stressed, remained a criterion that had to be met to justify both the recourse to war and the conduct of war. Well, what is bro yapping about? We're talking about just war theory, and what is the allowability of just dropping bombs on people, mostly to prevent them from wanting to fight with you. That's basically it. And so welcoming just regular. Hi, I'm Noah, Noger, No Gray, whatever, and we talk philosophy here. Viper says, the threat for our future isn't tech directly, it's climate change. Around 20 years, our biome will start to shift, assessing the receding of the entire fucking world. The global economy will crash, there will be massive migrations, millions of refugees. It's not going to be pretty. Yeah, we've got to do something about climate and food and all that stuff. I hope it's longer than 20 years, but what do I know? It linked just ad bellum and just in bello. But what guidance did it actually provide? Oh yeah, and welcome in anyone here. Feel free to ask questions along the way. My first time reading it too, so I don't know, but I try to explain as best. What do you think World War III about to happen? Nah, not really. Again, this is relying on Shane McGinnis, who I shouted out a few minutes ago now. He said basically that the stuff in the Middle East is a lot of trumped up shit. No one really wants to go into a bigger war. Of course it could blow up. I don't know. But there's been lots of little conflicts all over the place, and I don't have any reason to think they're going to expand, but of course they could. Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think Iran and all that's gonna start fighting. So Zeta says, if I had to choose between two evils, major and minor, I would rather not choose at all. Says Geralt of Rivia. The problem is that not doing nothing about the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki would have led to us to many more casualties, many more Japanese deaths. Could have the USA dropped the bombs on an empty area near Japan, but still visible from the Japanese cities, to demonstrate the mighty atomic power. Yeah, this is the problem. There's a lot of what ifs, and we just don't know. And so the idea here is we do know that fucking people up makes them not want to fight with us. And does that excuse just killing tons of people? Does it? And we usually say no, but if we're preventing a lot worse stuff than a consequentialist said, yeah, just go kill a lot of people now to prevent a whole lot more people dying in the future. We don't like that answer. Yeah, so we're trying to just do the proportionality thing here. Is that what we're talking right now? Is that, look, whatever your reasons to go for war, then you shouldn't be doing things that are out of proportion for your reasons. Okay, but what guidance did it actually provide, especially when the results were not so clearly decisive as proponents such as Harris or Lord Cherwell promised? There is no scope here for a survey of the statements and strategy of the air wars. It is general knowledge that by 1945, Churchill himself had some doubts, and that until a few years ago, Arthur Harris was deprived of the honors bestowed on the air warriors themselves. Long before, however, two judgments became commonly accepted. First, that the Americans somehow had clung to precision bombing as a strategy and were less morally obtuse than the British, at least in Europe. Second, that the bombing was not really effective in achieving its goals. Okay, so yeah. Yeah. I don't know what South and North is, yeah. Just regular. Both these statements can be contested, however. It is true that with the important exception of Gerald Hap, Arnold and his junior officer Curtis bombed them back to the Stone Age. LeMay, that's, bomb them back to the Stone Age. I've heard that, that's a quote. Transferred to oversee the bombing of Japan in 1944-45, American military doctrine did not argue that civilian bombing as such might produce a rapid end to the conflict. The U.S. clung to the shrouding large-scale bombing with particular industrial or strategic objectives. Okay, yeah, so we have to, strategic or industrial. Nonetheless, American bombers did participate in the Dresden raids and continued bombing targets until almost the last weeks of the war, when it was clear that they could play little strategic role. In theory, disruption of rail communications could justify almost any attack, but in fact, the prevailing emotion seems to have been that no target should remain unspared. The argument was an implicit one of potential resistance. It no longer claimed that civilian morale would collapse. It simply postulated that the more destruction there was, the sooner the collapse would come. Yeah, see, that's, it makes sense, but if there's no causal structure there, there's destruction, collapse. But you're just saying, well, it's going to happen. That's a lot of hand waving. There's definitely a correlation, but when? What's the force on the sooner here? How do you actually know that sooner it's going to happen? I mean, who knows? Americans too studied how to achieve the felicitous result of firestorms of the kind that ravaged Hamburg. And Americans, of course, pursued an air war on Japan that was directed against cities as targetable units. The U.S. chose weapons and incendiary bombs designed to start widespread devastation of urban areas, aware that both civilians and artistic monuments must fall victim to this destruction. What do I think of the age restriction on video games for children under the age of 18 in China? Can violent video games lead to mental problems? I would go with 16 mostly. I think 16 is I've read some research here on stream actually, saying basically 16 is when people could, if they were possible, you can have a smart 16-year-old, and a smart 16-year-old isn't much different from a smart 25-year-old in many ways. So it's I'm going to go with 16. Am I angry with the Chinese government for calling it 18? No, that's fine. They can make that call for their population. That seems fine. Should certain media be restricted? Yeah, again, I don't know if they are choosing the right media to ban. That I don't know what they're banning, or restricting, but I don't see it as actually a bad thing to have some control over this. Do I think that video games are really responsible for bad mental health? Probably not. There's always been won't someone please think of the children? There was rock and roll music in the 50s. They didn't think it was too sexualized and it was going to mess up the kids. And that's been a refrain over lots of history. So I don't actually think most of these things are doing much good, but that doesn't mean that everything should go. No, I don't think everything should be allowed. It's just you have to be a bit more careful about it. So, frankly, yeah, exactly. I turned out perfectly fine. So, it's, hey, DCI, what's up? So, is the Chinese, am I against what the Chinese government, them making a law like that? No. Do I know how they're doing it? No, either. So, I don't know if they're doing it well, but, I have no problem with that, either. Yeah, did I turn out perfectly fine? I don't know. I play a lot of Minesweeper. Should Minesweeper be restricted? I have no idea. So, the issue of the efficacy was raised by the famous result of the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, whose members, especially John Kenneth Galbraith, argued that bombing had achieved far less of an impact than had been claimed. Okay, so people were saying it just didn't work either. Who knows? So, boom, did not work. The report pointed out Germany's industrial production continued to increase until the autumn of 1944, that railroads and even factory buildings were quickly repaired, and that morale was not seriously impaired. Zeta says, I think the Chinese government is limiting time for video games to a certain amount of hours per week. If you recall, it's the rate. I mean, if they want their population to have be okay, look, you can play video games, but you can't overdo it, that may be a very good idea. We're talking about restricting social media for kids under the age of 18 or 16, and Florida says they're doing it. It's I didn't think Florida would go for the nanny state solution, but I'm not if they want to try that, maybe it'll be good for them. I don't know. It's I don't know how smart any of these things actually are, but the idea that they are worried about their population and are trying to do something about it, it's it's okay. Yeah. I mean, from my recollection of being a kid, you're going to find shitty things to do regardless. And so it's just like you're just forcing the kids to either get better at lying, it's going to go underground, or they're going to do something else irresponsible because they're kids. That's how kids are. And so the idea that like it's really going to do a whole lot, I don't know. Nanny State Solutions, exactly it. No, it made me laugh out loud. We try here. This is still a show, even if we're reading philosophy. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember being a kid. Like, parents thought like I was doing one thing, I was doing something else. It was not what they probably expected, but like, it's like, yeah, no. So, and I expect the kids are the same the world over. The parents and the like government thinks the kids are doing one thing, but the kids are going to find something else to do. Okay. The survey's minimizing judgments were long accepted and cited by domestic opponents of President Johnson's and Nixon's resort to heavy bombing of North Vietnam. More recent assessments, such as Richard Overy's view, however, challenged the survey's early dismissal of air war efficacy. According to Overy, the Allied attacks produced a downward spiral of industrial collapse for the Third Reich, above all when bombing concentrated on strategic industrial targets. Germany relied on synthetic oil from hydrogenation for 3/4 of her consumption, and the oil offensive cost Germany 90% of her synthetic production between May and September of 1944. Destroying railway lines precluded adequate fuel transportation and thus limited use of German fighter defenses, which rendered Allied bombing all the more effective, thus destroying more fuel supplies, etc. We cannot test the counter-hypothesis, namely what would German production have achieved without the bombing. German production declined only from the second half of 1944, and part of the downturn immediately followed after Romanian oil sources were finally overrun by Soviet troops, and the Reich was fighting huge battles on two fronts. Yeah, and this is the other thing. In history, there's no, like, control set here. So, like, even people saying, it might have been different. It's like, well, all of that is in theory. There's no actual test. No experiment here. You can model this stuff now on computers. But again, we don't have a perfect simulation of how people are. Still, one can agree that to think of bombing as counterproductive, which some of its critics tended to claim, seems as simplistic a conclusion as to believe that it alone could have defeated the Third Reich, as Bomber Harris insisted. Intuitively, it does seem incredible to think that the massive and continuous attacks on a densely populated country did not cut into transport and production, as well as wearing down industrial workers whose nights were spent taking whatever shelter was provided. It was a costly strategy. Airmen were not easily replaced, and 140,000 British and Americans died in the attacks, while 21,000 planes were lost. It had cost in the Pacific Theater too, though less in terms of bombers succumbing to defending fighters, for Japan was largely denuded of defense than in terms of the lives and efforts needed to capture the outlying island bases from which the planes could reach the home islands. Even so, with less tonnage, bombing took its terrible toll even before the Americans used their two nuclear weapons. Zeta asked, what do I think about the media? Any real journalists left talking about facts without their opinions? By opinions, I mean, like, for example, they probably are evil terrorists, blah, 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 be good, we good, they bad. So without propaganda, just want to know X place was destroyed and why, and Z people died. You're never going to get, like, pure reporting. Like, it never was in the past either. So I don't know if there's, like, any real journalists left. The idea that there were real journalists in the past, I mean, that's propaganda too. That's just saying that what they said were right. Now, of course, there are more and less, more honest journalists and less honest journalists. So there's better and worse. You're going to have to, like, get a survey of stuff because everyone comes with a perspective nowadays. And it was, not even nowadays, everyone comes with a perspective. And so don't take my word for stuff. Like, get my word, go check other experts at stuff, and you're going to have to, like, look at the history. Or is what they're saying ridiculous or not? And so the media is shitty, yes, and we really do not have a good handle on the internet yet. The internet and the way it, like, affects people, we don't understand that yet. So it's not like this is a new technology, a new media, a new form of this, and we don't understand it. So, like, things are in upheaval at the moment. I mean, Sports Illustrated just laid off, like, all their staff because, like, AI can write all their articles now. You give it a little bit of prompts, a little bit, like, figuring it out, and, like, you don't even need, like, editors anymore. You need like one editor, and that's it. So we really don't understand stuff. So it's in flux at the moment. That's what I think about the media. than anything David Bowie ever said. David Bowie apparently said this like about like the internet in like 1994 or something. He seems to know what he's talking about. I mean, that's the other thing. We have capitalism, internet, and like all the other things we've inherited from the past, and like it's what it is. Perhaps it is useful to separate the arguments for a bombing used before D-Day from those afterwards. Between 1940 and 42, Britain was unable to bring any counterforce to bear outside North Africa except by air. Military necessity usually remains a highly subjective factor. But Churchill believed, in my opinion correctly, that it was important for the UK to inflict damage on the foe at a time when his country had been forced out of the continent. Its troops in Africa remained hard-pressed, and it stood until June 1941 without a major ally. Once Russia entered the war, bombing enabled the British to claim that they too were making a positive contribution to the defeat of Hitler. As Overy points out, however, Churchill's turn to bombing in 1942 was provoked by Stalin's taunt about Allied inaction with respect to a second front, and it came at a point when it seemed a wasteful diversion of air power from a better use. Dresden too was probably attacked largely because the Soviets complained that Britain and the US were not contributing their fair share to the winter of 1945, the forthcoming land battles within Germany. Yeah, I mean, there's always the ridiculous number of people, number of Russians that died in World War II. That like completely huge amount compared to the lives lost on like the Western Front. In the early days, however, the arguments for bombing were not officially developed in terms of morale and retaliation. They followed the more tortuous course of reasoning about the scale of civilian casualties permissible to set back Germany's war industry. Although Harris and others thought terror as such was permissible because it must surely weaken the enemy's will, the Allies did not officially accept such a justification. Zeta says, pure reporting is what interests you. Their opinion is not required because I can think by myself. As for it is always about the money that moves people. Always asks who's going to become rich for what just happened. Follow the money. Yeah, there's so little, like, I don't know if there's anything like pure reporting. Like, what do you mean? Like, the weather was this temperature at this time and place? Like, this person did what? How do you actually take morals out of what you're saying? Why do you think that reporting, even what you report, is neutral? It's not going to be neutral. Like, the way you classify stuff is not even neutral. So, like, when Hugo Chavez got into power, I think, in South America, there were slums in the area, and the previous, I forget if it was Hugo, one of the socialist or communist people that took over, there were slums in certain areas, and that what was previously labeled a park, because it was a public park, but like people were living there, that dictator, or maybe he was president at the time, I don't even know, whoever that was, labeled it slums. Now, it was a public park, that's true. Were there people living there? That's also true. The way they reported it, in terms of factual name, because it was slums, but it was also public land, like, that makes a big difference in how it gets treated. So there is no, like, pure reporting, because even in the terms you're using, you've got, like, political and social contexts that get brought up. So it's not so clear that, like, there is, like, some sort of, like, objective reality that you can just go report on. Nah, it's going to come with attitudes and, like, positions. So, yeah. And you can think by yourself, but you have to realize people still are people. They're always just people reporting, and they have an attitude. What's up, Reading Rap? How you doing? Welcome in. We are doing some just war theorizing and having to do with bombings of people, because when you bomb cities, you don't know who you're bombing. So it includes civilians. So yeah. Nonetheless, the earlier notions of collateral damage themselves proved sufficiently elastic. Any industrial or transport capacity contributed to the German and Japanese war effort. Yeah, see that? Any. All of a sudden you can be like, okay, those buses, that's contributing to the war effort. So that's interesting. How much devastation was permissible? In targeting Sodom and Gomorrah for incendiary attacks, even God was willing to allow innocent victims. That's funny. They're just pulling out the old biblical stories. Once the tide had turned, violence was ingrained, and the capacity to inflict damage, but largely indiscriminate damage, had been vastly enhanced. Only Hitler and Goebbels were frank enough to describe that the V1 and V2 attacks in the latter stages of the war were indeed designed to wreak terror, hence their V designation for, I The Germans will have to read that, meaning reprisal or retaliation, but they could not win the battle. Yeah. Yeah, I was lurking Globus earlier, but I was doing stuff, so. Hope you're doing, reading map, hope you're doing well. And Valpo, what's up? Yes, you can. I reserve the right to not answer, but you can definitely ask, and I usually try to answer. The German debate and the issue of taboos. Yeah, so this actually, I think, goes all the way to 16. Let's see. We're on page 9. Yeah, so we got to get through this, but, like, we'll do okay. I knew this was a little bit of a long paper, but that's fine. You have a dilemma. I found a hot twink streamer, and my mind wants to help promote him, but my heart says, no, keep him to yourself. So what should you do, Keck W? I mean, keep them to yourself. Yeah, you just want all the attention. You know, it is not on you to promote their stream. It's on them, and you can help as much as you want, Read and Rap. So, like, that's fine. It's not on you to help promote. Of course, it would be nice of you to help promote someone's stream, but there's no necessity for you to help any other streamer out there. It's always just a nice thing to do. Yeah. And so, you know, and in helping the streamer, you might actually get closer to them. You give them many tips. Exactly. Lots of tips. Zeta says, if they call it a slum or public area or whatever, it's because people have second reason behind their actions. Well, what do you call it then, Zeta? Those are all different names for something that they're like different perspectives on the one thing. Is there any one thing? They show you something the way they want to help, and in the meantime, they do all they can in their power to destroy you. How many times the U.S. didn't stop minding the business in their own yard? Oh, of course. Yeah, I'm not, of course, but like, why do you think there is an objective stance that like is somehow without like an opinion there? I think very rarely, maybe in reporting the weather, and even nowadays reporting the weather has like political ramifications. So like the only time you're going to do that is like really, really mundane stuff. And even then you might find that like the way they report the weather is, you know, pro-business. They're trying to show, oh, it's good for the business people. They're not talking about, is it like a super nice day like to go to the park? They're talking about, how's your commute? Why do anyone give a flying fuck about the commute? Well, it's pro-business. So it's like, think about that. Like even the weather has a perspective on it. Like you need to know what it's going to be like on your trip to work today. Well, who's that helping? Is helping people who go to work. Why is that helping? Well, then you can ask, who's making money on people going to work, as you said. But like even that is like, you know, that is helping someone make money then. Okay. Continuing paper. In retrospect, what has been striking about the post-war German discussion of these issues is the relative absence of political reproach, except in extreme right-wing circles, at least until a few years ago. Yeah, everything has a political dimension, says Read and Rap Europe. Dresden, for all the implicit reproach in the discussion about it, never became a Hiroshima. Of course, the fatalities, despite propagandistic inflation, were lower. 35,000, not 70 to 100,000. Yeah, see, this is one of the things. Some, like, people who lean, I think, towards the Marxist side think everything is political. Other people think there is stuff that isn't political. But again, then you're, like, get yourself explicitly into, like, philosophical discussions on how do we describe the world. And then, like, then you get yourself into another philosophical discussion. But, like, again, that might be a fine distinction. Ivanio says journalistic institutions are important. We cannot rely on individual bloggers, etc. They're not held to any standards of ethics. The New York Times will fire you if you don't have any real sources or violate ethics. It is not a scientific culture to pump truth up and reject falsehoods. Yeah, but of course, the New York Times has editorial, like they have editors and lots of stuff. But it's not just like random people either who might be, you know, have crazy ideas. But of course, there's no one that controls the New York Times. It has a board and it has an ethics panel. But like, it's like, yeah, some people, they have a policy, the Times does, and as do other people. So it's like, you just can't easily be like, oh, everything the Times says is true, or anything anyone else says is true or false, or any of that. There's no objective here. You just have to understand their perspective. And I'm from New York. Like, the New York Times is my local paper. Like, I've respected it for a long time, but they're not always right. And they sometimes have opinions that are shitty. Okay, the reasons for this reticence are not hard to find. West Germany remained dependent on the British and Americans for its post-war security against the Warsaw Pact alliance. Also, to raise the subject of German suffering seemed, for many good post-war Germans, to be tainted by the neo-Nazi politics. It might be acceptable for the Japanese to play the role of unique victims because of the atomic bomb, but that had indeed been a new and terrible weapon, and even the Japanese did not harp on the equally destructive conventional air raid on Tokyo in April 1945. Yeah, Ivan says the same thing applies to Wall Street Journal. If a big story isn't printed by New York Times and Wall Street Journal, it's not real. See, that's the thing. You have to look at both, you have to look at multiple sources. And if one's covering it and the other one isn't, you have to ask why. So, it might be a big one, but someone was saying something about, what's that, Al Jazeera? Someone was, I once knew someone from the country that, produced Al Jazeera, and they said, many times Al Jazeera is a good news source. You just can't trust it when it came to anything from their home country because it was controlled by that country. So it's like in other places they might have been somewhat objective, but when it came to talking about their home country, they said it was not objective at all. Now, this is just a report I heard once, but again, maybe in certain contexts they're better than others. That's all. So it's yeah, there is New York Times isn't directly controlled. It's just not. The New York Times has posted a lot of anti-science misinfo related to COVID and has been called out by major respected biologists and virologists in their field for misinfo in their op-eds. Yeah, their op-eds are different. It's not always as good. And they're not always right. That's exactly right. The editorial board helps, but they're not exempt from misinfo. In fact, they've been spreaders of it due to their op-eds not necessarily having the same stringent guidelines as their main articles and reporting. Yeah, that's one of the things about the Times is they want to get hot takes from lots of people. So you'll have people from all over the spectrum writing op-eds. So what up, Globus? How you been? I was lurking earlier, but I was doing stuff. What's going on? We're talking about just war considerations, especially with respect to aerial bombing assaults when you don't know what you're bombing underneath. You're definitely going to kill some civilians if you're bombing factories. So yeah, how you doing, Globus? Give Globus a shout out. Shout out the Globus the Elder. Globus is a AI news streamer. He goes over a lot of the new tech news and gives opinions, discussion, insight into that sort of stuff. So if you want some smart topical discussions, go head out to Globus. Cat's cool. Cat's always part of the stream. Yeah. So yeah, give Globus a follow if you don't know Globus. Yeah, we're just doing some good old philosophy. The truth is objective. Yeah, Zeta. I hope truth ain't so easy. Are we going to say the truth doesn't exist? I'm not saying truth doesn't exist. I'm saying that you're not going to get truth as easy as you want in reporting. That's a little too easy. In your opinion, we should trust external sources of information, not controlled. You don't know who's controlled or not. Or with interest in talking good about someone, yeah. In the media set in Italy, all commercial TV is controlled by the family of the Berlusconi. They're never going to talk about Berlusconi because Berlusconi family owns that TV network. Yeah. Well, we have the same problem here. We have there's something called Sinclair or whatever, and they own tons of media here, and you have to be careful about what they say. But it's again, you need to. There is no objective honest truth gonna be coming through any of these sources. You have to, it's gonna be somewhere in the middle, always. No, I'm sorry to hear that about the kitty. Oh, yeah. I was lurking. I was not paying that much attention. I just did not see the cat. I was like, God damn it. I'm sorry to hear that. Oh. Who controls WikiLeaks? Well, WikiLeaks is a special thing. That is different because anyone can send that out, and then you've got whoever WikiLeaks editorial board is, which God knows who that is. They did several crimes releasing documents, but those sources were accurate. I don't know. But yeah, they released it, but then you know what happens to all these online things? It happens time and time again. They may have had some good info sometimes. Then other people start releasing them information about people they don't like because they don't want to be seen releasing information. And then they release information about people they don't like, and then it's coming from WikiLeaks. Oh, it's an honest source. But then people are feeding them information, as an op to put dirt out about other people. Does WikiLeaks have a major editorial board to go and verify all this stuff? Probably not. But this is what happens. They may have had some good stuff, but then it gets co-opted. Happens time and time again. Leakers are modern day partisans for this paper. Yeah. So it's like, ooh, yeah, like someone's releasing information. And that's going to be more and more important in the information economy. You know, who is controlling, like the narrative nowadays? Like we've got this problem in the US where all of a sudden, like Taylor Swift has become the bad person. Like, how did Taylor Swift, a musician, become like politically important? It's insane if you think about, like, all of a sudden she's a singer, she started dating a football player, and now it's like becoming a political spectacle here in the US because Taylor is, you know, she's young, she's kind of on the liberal side, and it's like, oh god, people are afraid of like Taylor like endorsing Joe Biden. And it's like, it's madness. So yeah, but again, who controls the information, controls the narrative, controls the politics, controls the money. So what's going on? All right. Yeah, so apparently we can blow up. Yeah, so they were saying it was different when we blew up Nagasaki and Hiroshima with the atomic bomb, but like they don't harp on it even when we were blowing up Tokyo, but with more conventional bombs. All right. Still, debate was renewed a few years ago and along two separate tracks. First of all, the issue of German victims reemerged most sensationally in a book by Jörg Friedrich, Der Brand Deutschland in the Fire, Germany in the Bombing Campaign. What about Edward Snowden? Can we trust him? Why would you trust a single person? You can trust some of the stuff. I think he released good information, but I don't actually think a lot of the information he released was like all that new. It just made a splash. And why would you just trust that one guy? You have to go look at the information and see if it was okay. It looked like his information was good, but like, why would you trust me? Why would you trust him? Like, I'm just some guy on the internet. Like, seriously? Yeah. Ivan says a lot of bias from form of omission or context. For example, the video of Central Park Karen was objective in one sense, but the incident was horribly misreported because of the context of the video was missing. Yeah, both the people were shitty in the Central Park Karen case. Reading Rap says, are there good sources outside the mainstream news organizations that have a high rating of factual reporting accuracy from major fact-checking outlets despite their bias? For example, Democracy Now! Does have a high factuality score from many mainstream independent fact-checkers despite being openly socialist and anti-capitalist. Yeah, so this is the sort of thing. You have to go look at what everyone's saying and go find out and take a look. So, but like, one guy, Edward Snowden, yeah, he did one thing once. He released some documents and then he had something to say about it, and you can judge him at that point. But I mean, he's been out of the game for years. He's just been working in like Yandex or whatever. It's like, okay, smart guy, but like, and you can listen to his opinions, but he's not doing the work anymore. He might belong in prison. Blow the whistle if you want to, but spill secrets and run to an enemy? Yeah. Media literacy and healthy. Yeah. As I said, go follow Globus the Elder. If you want to talk media literacy and healthy skepticism. Yeah, so. The Friedrich book appeared at a moment many writers were opening issues of German suffering in the war and asking whether post-war German culture had repressed any sustained discussion of German status as victims, as was claimed most notably by the late literary scholar and novelist W.G. Sebald in his Zurich Lectures, published under the title Air, War, and Literature. In the same connection, Günter Grass published his novel Crab Walk, which gradually circled around and then told the story of the sinking of a German liner in the Baltic that was evacuating 9,000 refugees fleeing Soviet invasion. Yeah, you still like Edward. You like Edward, but he's not. Yeah, he's not relevant now. Yeah. Russians are not the enemy. Governments are our enemies. They brainwash you to go into war, kill men like you. Same thing for the Russian soldiers. Yeah. I mean, I feel bad for the Russian soldiers. I mean, they don't know any better. I feel mostly like, why would you support that government? But I don't know enough about Russia and Russian politics and stuff. Yeah. It seems terrible out there. None of these authors could be suspected of neo-Nazi tendencies. Friedrich had written about German war crimes. Grass was a maverick leftist whose subject was the maiming or survival of ordinary people caught up in German history they perhaps should have earlier resisted but didn't. Sebald had written melancholy tales of German Jewish refugees and their inability to work through the impact of persecution in their later lives. Obviously, all were moved by the numbers, 500,000 killed in the air war, 9,000 on the ill-fated ship, and needed to let the dead finally speak out. Friedrich's book is an attempt to describe the aerial war from the viewpoint of those bombed, which it does in unsparing detail. It has broken through what was a virtual taboo about open discussion of the approximately 500,000 German civilian deaths in the Anglo-American air raids of 1940 to 45 and the destruction of cities and cultural treasures. Let us separate the book from the problem or problems it raises. At the emotional core of his account, Friedrich stresses the horrors of incendiary bombing, death by burning and melting asphalt, by incineration in accelerators, by asphyxiation through carbon monoxide, and deprivation of oxygen. There is no shortage of accounts of large explosive bombs and of bomb blast effects on the human body. He also gives due credit to the guidance systems and the marking of targets by flares. Zeta says they were all brainwashed. Are they all? We were all brainwashed since we were born. It's like the Matrix, and as soon as you have a TV in your house, you are linked into the Matrix and aliens. The government control you. You need to unplug yourself and put the TV where it belongs, in the trash can. I mean, you are watching Twitch, which is owned by Amazon, one of the biggest corporations in the world. I mean, am I being controlled by Amazon? Maybe. I mean, Jeff Bezos is watching us right now, getting his fingers in. But it's like, if you believe that like everything is a lie and everything else, then you got problems too, because what do you rely on? But yeah. It's like, yeah, but okay. That's how civilization's always been. There's always limited information. We are always only in the fog of war. We only see what we see. We don't see things from other people's perspective. We only have a certain history that we know. We only have certain experiences in our lives. It's always a fog of war, the whole thing. And so it's like, the idea that what I'm trying to do here a lot of times is show what is of value in philosophy writing. What do I know about any of this? I know arguments very well, so I can tell people about that. And maybe you get a different perspective here than you can get elsewhere. You call me out if I say something stupid. It's go right ahead. I have a thick skin. But it's if you think everything is everywhere is bad, then what do you rely on at all? Okay. But the incendiary bomb, dropped in thousands, remains the real technological protagonist, burning its way through the roofs of Gothic and Renaissance landmarks as well as private housing. Life is like that, yeah. Yeah, everyone say hi to Jeff. Hi, Jeff. He describes the shriveled or carbonized remnants of victims being brought in baskets for burial, the destruction of families, the efforts at civil defense, and the dispersal of children, a measure which the population hated. Yeah, you don't want to let your kids go. That's really bad. He points out that as much destruction followed during the final year of the war as in all previous years before, devastating raids not only on railroads or in return visits to towns smashed repeatedly before, but also on cities ranging from Dresden to Wurzburg and Potsdam, whose destruction seemed called for mainly because they had until then been spared. Yeah, hit everyone else who we haven't hit. Although the book focuses primarily on British bombings, American readers will recall the devastating accounts of the Tokyo raid of 9-10 March 1945 and the toll as our B-29s roamed virtually unopposed over Japanese cities as from November 1944, dropping incendiary weapons on wooden housing with sometimes even greater human costs. Billy Mitchell, the American pioneer of naval bombing, had recognized this as early as the 1920s when he described the Japanese cities as the greatest aerial targets the world has ever seen. The Friedrich book offended many Germans and a fortiori Anglo-American readers by its inflammatory language which borrowed the rhetoric used for the final solution, including the terminology of the Holocaust. But I wonder whether we Anglo-American readers, for whom the Second World War remains above all the most righteous military cause, do not seek to evade the questioning the book provokes by pointing to the admittedly charged language. And so too, may those German readers who fear the apologetics implicit in the work. Yes, Friedrich resorts to the images we usually associate with the Holocaust literature, but children and adults did end up incinerated. Discursive fastidiousness should not serve as a defense mechanism to draw too much comfort from the flaws that are documented. Rethia says, I think the argument here boils down to might makes right as a geopolitical national scale. Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. If you're looking at the world from the position of the nation, then that nation is trying to destroy your nation, then you have to destroy that whole nation first. It's this self-defense thing. I mean, he is my boss. He's not my boss, but Amazon is not above the First Amendment, right? Their TOS. No, of course, the First Amendment has nothing to do with TOS. Nothing at all. Of course it's above it. TOS has nothing to do with the First Amendment right. And frankly, my stream, I can control the speaker. I can ban people at will if I want from this stream. So this stream is not at all covered by First Amendment. First Amendment has nothing to do with anything. First Amendment has only to do with what the government permits you to say. It has nothing to do with what I permit you to say or Amazon. And so, of course, the Amazon is above the First Amendment. They have they can do whatever they want. Yeah. All right, so read and rep. All right, we're all discussing with read and rep now. I mean, with Zeta. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so, okay. It's all sort of that stuff. Yeah, so I guess this is an interesting argument here, though. It's like, we've been avoiding the horrors we've done in order to, like, we had a righteous cause. But if we've avoided the horrors we've committed, then are we really asking the hard question of, like, what is the justification? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, corporate business can do whatever the hell it wants here in the U.S. It has nothing to do with amendments. Siebold's thesis of literary repression is also flawed. In the early post-war period, as Volkshage's collection shows, German accounts of bombing and urban destruction did appear, but they were not backed up in major essays or novels. No German dialogue on those issues came into being, such as that generated by Germans themselves on their own war crimes and genocide. As Pfeiffer rightly notes, there was in fact extensive, though often specialized literature on the latter subjects. Rather than an outright taboo, there has been an inhibition against producing or citing materials about German suffering as such. Yes, we have surveys of the Air War, the ones written by the victors, and the important scholarly work carried out at the Freiburg Center for Military History, but such works rarely dwell on the experience of being bombed. Commentators have also raised the question of why non-neo-Nazi Germans could not write this history so graphically before, or let themselves discuss it more openly. Yeah, well, the experience of being bombed is pretty, this is a pretty specialized discussion, the experience of being bombed. Now, why was that not written before? That's an interesting question. Why was it a limited thing? But you've got to, like, it's like, yeah, what exactly was going, what in the culture prevented them talking about the horrors? Yeah. The answer put forward by Hans Ulrich Wehler and others is that they were acutely aware that their regime bore the responsibility for the war and had killed on an even larger scale, committing outright murder in which each and every death inflicted was intentional. Okay, so there's an intention here. So the fact that, like, you were dying by being bombed is bad, but they weren't killing you intentionally, like you specifically. They were killing you in the abstract, like all of you. But, it's like when it was intentional, somehow that seems worse. That is one of the bad things about the Holocaust. Some Germans, I believe, were silent not merely because they could not reconcile themselves to the deaths, but because they really did understand where the chain of murderous warfare began. Quote, as young survivors, we took no oaths of revenge against the Allied bombers. In a certain sense, we felt a solidarity with them. They would destroy that system that we ourselves had erected, but which we did not have the strength to overthrow. Peter Wapniewski writes. Yeah. Even Friedrich, who is outraged by the suffering inflicted, states, quote, the destruction of the cities helped the cause of eliminating Himmler and his adherents who had taken hostage these places, this history and this humanity, all Germany and all Europe, end quote. But it was Germany, too, which had taken these hostages, quote, whether through violence, approval, or anger, out of equanimity or impotence. Indifferent Germany was nothing but hypothetical, a would or might have been, end quote. Yeah, so they got themselves caught up in this for worse. And then so like kind of saying, well, what would happen if the Germans had resisted Hitler? It's like, well, no one knows and it doesn't really matter at this point. He goes on to say, however, that it is also hypothetical to ask whether the conflagration might have been unnecessary. Quote, did Hildesheim have to be destroyed for its railroad station? Was this the reason? Was there really any reason? What did those who set the fires intentionally and in anger want to win at any price, or was this the price that had to be paid for their victory? Certainly this was their effort. If this represents no tragedy as part of the Allies' history, was their total success the same for the history of the Germans? Yeah, so again, if it all comes down to it, like, is winning the only thing that matters? There's something to be said that, like, people have a long memory. Like, if you, like, people remember genocides from a long time ago. And so it's like, people don't forget that. They're like, oh no, those people killed my great grandparents. And so that doesn't get forgotten. It's like that continues throughout history. Like if you're going to wipe somebody out, you have to wipe them out completely. You can't let anyone live. There can be no record of it, nothing. And that usually is not what happens. Like usually never. So it's like the idea that you're getting away with it for this, it's like, I don't know in the end. Now, this is a very long-term, like, predicting thing, but, like, even then, it's not a good strategy because you're going to piss some people off, and they'll, if, you know, they're going to remember, and their kids are going to remember, and they may try to come back at you, like, way later. Critical historians, okay, continuing. Critical historians have simply labeled the book demagogic and flawed. In effect, this is a strategy of compartmentalization, which I do not share. Friedrich raises serious issues that we cannot seriously deal with if we merely object to inflammatory language or lack of balance. Friedrich does understand that after the 1940 defeat in the West, there seemed to be no choice for the British but to strike at the enemy with whatever weapons were available if they were not to come to terms. Did not morale, as Churchill sensed, require inflicting some damage on an enemy that threatened to invade and was laying waste to London? Could any democratic statesman set on resistance not have followed this strategy? Yet, was there not a point at which it changed, as Arthur Harris said it should, from a purposeful pursuit of targets, whether railroads or industry, to moral bombing? Okay, so we got moral bombings here. Thank you, Ruth. Nor is this change surprising. Yeah, moral bombing. Like, well, this is an interesting point here, I find, too. Like, at some point, is, like, retaliation just to keep your people's morale up? Like, is that worth something? Like, do you have to just do anything to get people going? Like, when you take the first step, like, it doesn't matter sometimes what that first step is. You just have to get moving. And sometimes if you are in this sort of position, you just have to strike back. How would you know if that first move is going to actually do anything worthwhile? You don't know. It's just the first step is just to get going. So, like, it's a little bit weird right there. Like, if you just have to do anything to, like, get moving again, then, like, can you really be like, well, maybe this is not the right first step? Maybe you can't ask that question. Okay. Nor is this change surprising to the moral bombing. As Friedrich understands, the air war became one of a Vergeltung, or a retribution in which the British went far beyond the level of destruction they themselves had suffered, just as the American Vergeltung against Japan vastly exceeded the toll taken at Pearl Harbor that was so often cited as justification. My neighbor, he died a few years ago, he had a friend that was a long-range radar operator at Pearl Harbor. Somehow, all the long-range radar was apparently down for repair when the Japanese attacked. Very suspicious. Alright. Yeah, we've got some conspiracy 9/11 theories going on. Okay. Yeah, so chill out on the 9/11 talk. That's not going to help anything. Retribution fueled the air war as much as did strategy. Peter Wapniewski's recollection, notwithstanding, many Germans impatiently waited the retaliatory V weapons that Goebbels promised. Yeah. Like, I'm in New York. We've heard all of that stuff before. Most of it's because, like, looking at engineering from the past, you think they probably did a shitty job building the buildings at the first point, but it's like, yeah. You just can't with a 9/11 truth in 2024. Yeah, it's not worth it. But yeah. They're long debunked. Yeah. The contentious issue is not military success alone. As mentioned above, the American Strategic Bombing Survey's critique of the efficacy of bombing no longer seems tenable. By the summer and autumn of 1944, the war machine was largely incapacitated. Air defenses were faltering, production began to fall sharply. Surely argue their historian defenders, the tons of which explosives that rained down on them from the air brought about collapse. Well, again, did the English know that at the time? You read map is like, I've literally heard this specific theory debunked, but it won't matter. Someone with motivated reasons, not worth the effort. Yeah, it's not worth it. You just have to. That's not how to. You're not going to convince someone who's convinced of a conspiracy. It just doesn't work. I got my buddy at work, a guy I work with. He likes to argue with flat earthers. Like, this is a hobby of his. And it's like he doesn't think he's convinced any of the hardline flat earthers, but he said I asked him, like, do you think maybe some of the onlookers get convinced? He says, yeah, because sometimes the people he's in discussion with, some of the other people there be like, you have good points. I kind of like your point of view. So, yeah. The earth is flat. Have you seen Kansas? That's true. Kansas is flat. Conspiracy. Oh, your favorite book is by Michael Shermer. Ah, there you go. I've not seen Kansas, by the way. Yeah, there's a huge ecosystem, too. I mean, who's getting paid for that stuff? As per usual. Okay. Yeah, so the historian defends the tons of explosives rained down brought about the collapse, to which critics can respond first that other factors including military setback on the ground played a large role, and second, while so-called precision bombing was not precise, the Allies did not have to embrace city bombings so indiscriminately. I personally think that the bombing can be credited with another success. The demonstrated hopelessness of the Nazi defense had something to do with the fact that after World War II, there was no real revanchist movement, no defiant nationalism. But then again, defeat without immolation might also have achieved an equal post-war success. No, the issue remains the price of success. That is always debated and must be debated by historians as well as those who were directly involved. Okay, so this is a further claim here the author just made. It says, because there was no comeback, like there was no like German like reprisal, was that because we overbombed them? And like that's a thing. Hurt me over your flat earth arguer will become modern day conspiracy whalers. Yeah, like he literally does this. Like I think he's cut down because his wife was yelling at him for it. He'd always be like on the phone, like hee, like making fun of those people. Yeah, go outside, the earth is flat, QED. Exactly. But yeah, I see him sometimes laughing on his phone. I'm like, what are they saying now? And some of their like new theories, like they're just like insane. There's things like we're in a dome. Like if you've ever seen them, it's like we're in a dome, and that's why they like Elon Musk usually, but they hate him for SpaceX. They think his rockets are gonna break the dome, and then we'll like lose all our oxygen to outer space because he's gonna break the dome. Like seriously, they're afraid of SpaceX smashing the dome over the flat Earth. Like, wow, really? Who made the dome? I don't know. Okay. The non-existent Anglo-American debate in the issue of reprisal. How tall? Yeah, dude, it's a crazy theory. They think like the balloon is like the moon is a hot air balloon or something. Yeah. It's like nuts. The non-existent Anglo-American debate in the issue of reprisal. Yeah, so this is I want to just comment here. This is interesting. They think that maybe there's part of the reason the Germans felt like so shitty was because of how bad we bombed them. Since bombing them out of like all their culture, they just sort of like had nothing to feel good about, and so they didn't actually want to come back after that point. That's weird, but like maybe. All that matters is they're lying to us. What's true doesn't matter. Yeah. Like, no. Stuff is like, I mean, I have many fewer truths than I think other people have, but I still have truth here. Like, this is a hand. I always say I'm very more in truth. So like, this is a hand. Like I'm sitting right now. Sure. Like that stuff. And so you can figure stuff out. I've not seen The Expanse. Yeah. I've heard that it's good though, Zeta. Yeah. Okay. What is striking about these debates is, I believe, first of all, the fact that they did not resonate more strongly in Germany. For all the cries about the German proclivity to victimization, the bombing issue has hardly become a major or hotly discussed political subject. It has not stirred up public sympathy or awareness like the Hiroshima attack has done in Japan. German civic culture abandoned the tout coquet attitude it still largely maintained throughout the 1950s. Yes, for a long while there were many stories of victimization, especially among refugees from East Prussia, the territories taken over by post-1945 Poland, and the Sudetenland. Friedrich's book can be seen as a continuation of the strand of self-pitying and often right-wing apologetics, but non-Germans are in fact willing to listen to this narrative with the sympathy that was excluded in Germany until very recently, except on the far right. Opinion on the far right. Yeah, the opinion on the Expanse is the first thing he said that made sense. Yeah, well. Michael Powers News has a 3-hour video debunking every single 9/11 conspiracy on history. Yeah. There's like a great documentary, like what's it called, like Beyond the Curve or something, where they have like somebody goes and investigates the flat earthers and like how hard they try to prove the Earth's flat. It's lovely. Václav Havel's expression of regret at the expulsions of Germans from the Sudetenland was a conspicuous case in point. Nonetheless, Friedrich's book and the related series of memoirs and commentaries in the press did not unleash any widespread attempts to claim a moral equivalence of German war crimes and Allied bombings. I believe this reticence is due to a deep-seated recognition that one cannot indulge in a sort of moral bookkeeping that offsets one series of atrocities against what might be considered another. The recent VE Day celebration on 8 May 2005 demonstrates even more clearly that the Germans are willing to forswear any political exploitation of the air war issue. You bailed season 2? Okay. A few years ago, they often tended to say that their country could not celebrate 8 May as a day of liberation since it simultaneously marked a catastrophic national defeat. At this most recent commemoration in Moscow and elsewhere, this reserved stance had completely changed. Germans participated as Germans who could welcome unreservedly the results of 8 May 1945. The political culture that allows conventional national feeling to be overcome in this way is not one that will sustain the undercurrents generated by Jörg Friedrich. Jürgen Habermas could be proud. Constitutional patriotism has prevailed even in the United Germany. Flat earthers must be poor or they would rent a fighter jet like the MiG capable of high altitude to see the curvature of the earth with their own eyes. Zeta, that's the problem. Some of them are not poor and some of them are not stupid, and they get like high tech science equipment to like try to prove that the earth is flat, and like the science equipment, even under all of their like checking to make sure it's working perfectly, always comes off wrong. Like it always is like, no, the earth is curved, and like they always find a reason why, well, something else could be wrong. So they like, it's not just a fighter jet, it's like they've tried, they really have. Okay, but equally striking to the author's mind is the absence of discussion in the United States, if not Great Britain. Yeah, but no one's shocked that the U.S. has their head up their butt. American political culture allows, I think, far less tolerant examination of earlier failings in World War II. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Or at least not yet. True Americans have engaged in national expiation with regard to Indians, the slavery, lynching, and segregation of African Americans, and the internment of West Coast Japanese Americans during World War II. But the good war is still too fresh in their memory or too necessary a perception to be subjected to the same emotional scrutiny. I think, was it Vipers that was that posted in one of the Discords that the Gen Z or Gen Alpha, they are starting to think that the Holocaust was overblown, probably due to lots of propaganda. And so maybe we're going to get back because they're going to be interested in looking at some of this stuff like more sympathetic to the Germans. Can we zoom in just a bit to where conspiracy theories always move the goalposts? Like I can't really zoom in too much on this paper. Zoom in on what? Yeah. Yeah, let me know more, Read and Rap, what you want to say. Okay, no need then. Yeah. It's just like, this is basically as good as I can get. There are like 10,000 neo-Nazis right now. That's a mess. If you've got like that bad of like a right wing, I know the government's right wing. It's tough. It's it's like, it's just a pain in the ass. But the world's got problems, and I can understand that the world's got problems, and people are looking for ways to like make it less. Yeah. There's 60 million Italians. So yeah, small percentage, but it still seems like a lot. So yeah, USA is a pain. Okay. Yeah, so this is not a new paper. This paper is, when's this paper from? This paper is from 2005, actually. So this is a 2005 paper. So in the last 20 years, basically, I think things are starting to shift. So maybe we're going to get more of this because the older generation's dying out. The younger generation has not been taught well. And so they're going to want to ask these questions and just be like, well, I want to know, because they don't have like the same sort of like, oh yeah, the USA was winning a moral war. So we'll see. All right. The fierce controversy over the Enola Gay exhibition in 1995, however flawed the explanatory material might have been, revealed the great resistance to this sort of scrutiny. In fact, Hiroshima and Nagasaki can be questioned and discussed, but the conventional air war remains beyond widespread popular re-evaluation. The recent histories of America's bombers, especially Stephen Ambrose's history of the B-24 Liberator raids, are cast in the heroic mold. Thomas Childers' moving study, which evidently inspired Ambrose, though he never acknowledged it, of his uncle's B-24 war, Wings of Morning, likewise did not seek to question the rationale for bombing raids up to and including April 1945. Childers, however, was explicitly writing a book about subjective experience, the very dangerous one that ordinary Americans undertook on orders, and he has promised a counterpart volume on experience of the war from the ground. But no one has suggested that if American soldiers are supposed to resist immoral orders, or commanders are punishable for giving them, any aspect of the air war should come within that moral category. What the air war discussion, German, British, and American alike, reveal is that much of the discussion about the legitimacy or just war justification of massive aerial bombardment was beside the point. In large-scale national wars, even in cases where societies were under totalitarian control and citizens were not thought to have any influence over their rulers, reprisal became an accepted course of action. They want to dumb us down. Look how they want everyone to pass the test at schools, making them easier. So they want us stupid. Another conspiracy mind because genius kids can go to their schools for geniuses. Well, if they are poor, well, that's another problem. We do not educate our own people very well, and I don't think it's any conspiracy. Like, we have this in the United States. They've been trying to get rid of public education and water it down for years because I think they just like a dumb populace, or the people in power like a dumb populace because then they stay in power. I mean, I don't think it's much of a conspiracy that they don't like an educated populace because educated populace will ask questions about why those people have all this money. They didn't do anything for it. I mean, it would be a conspiracy, but it's too stupid. Like, it's just too stupid here in the U.S. Alright, as a British Liberal MP wrote in 1942, I am all for the bombing of working class areas of German cities. Wow, it's a terrible thing to say. Then he says, I am Cromwellian. I believe in slaying in the name of the Lord because I do not believe you will ever bring home to the civil population of Germany the horrors of war until they have been tested in this way. Of course, bombing for pedagogical purposes is not meant to imply that 5-year-olds deserve that lesson. Rather, it presumes German parents need to learn it by watching their innocent infants die. But even without this degree of righteous anger, we tend to accept reprisal. Potential reprisal certainly became an acceptable recourse during the Cold War, when massive retaliation rested on mutually assured deterrence, and the second strike or counter-city strategy was largely accepted until the 1980s, when the consensus about nuclear deterrence started unraveling. Zeta says, I would ask how those billionaires become billionaires. It said Silvio Berlusconi's dad was given money from the mafia. Yeah, most billionaires did not earn it. Most of it's shitty. Hey, what's up, MDD? How you doing? Maybe MD is wrong, but it feels like the new generation entering the left is also susceptible to populist analysis. Well, of course. And it's like, people are people. Just because they're young, they're not going to be like any like different from like the older generations. They're just going to have a different set of problems. Hopefully we'll move on from some of the ones we've had in the past. Like, I'd really like if like this fucking gender culture war shit just went away. Like, you can have whatever gender you want. I don't care. Like, just have it and be happy, and let's like leave those fucking people alone because they're people and they deserve to be able to live whatever they want. But it's like, did I analyze the bill? No, because it's impossible to make tons of money. It just is. Like, how did I know tons of people that work super hard and they don't make any money? And the idea that like the billionaires are doing anything different from any of those other people is nonsense. Because I know lots of people that work really hard and no one's making no $1 billion. The conspiracy related to schools is structural racism and classism. Yeah, it's just not. It's not a conspiracy. It's like just the same old bullshit. Exactly. Reading Rep says, we saw this with Gen Z and the Saddam Hussein letters about the U.S. There's a grain of truth in there in critiquing the U.S. funding and manufacturing of wartime materials and the negative impact of the controls of capital by large corporations on the economy, democracy, and human rights in the U.S. and other countries. But there was also a ton of terrible ideas and misinfo as well. Yeah, I mean, this is, Yeah. It's like there's plenty of things to criticize the United States for. Plenty. Like I said, mostly it's not a bad place to live for the most part. So, the conspiracy related to schools. Okay. The schools. Yeah. I mean, of course, if Globus wants to do it, feel free. But basically, the powers that be here are more than happy to shift. They want to shift the funds so that basically they benefit from them. And that's going to be away from the minorities and the poor, because they don't like the minorities and the poor. Like the rich people do not here in the US, or they haven't for a long time. And so it's just they structurally set things up that the money goes where they want to go. And then like the schools in poorer areas and the minority areas don't get the money. And so those kids are trying to compete with kids that get a lot more support. And then it's a simple question of who's getting the better quality education, the ones with the cool stuff or the ones with nothing. Easy. Yeah, so billionaires billions because capital allows them. Yeah, that's true. It's capitalism. And how are laws made in the system? Don't blame the system, not the smart men that take advantages, find loopholes, and blame the corruption of the politicians. No, you can still blame the people too. I mean, you're saying don't hate the player, hate the game. No, you can still hate the player if you want. A lot of times the player's shitty. Yeah. The culture war is being weaponized so that the ruling elite ends up with a greater diversity. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the powers that be just don't want to lose their power. That's mostly what it is. And they don't mind allowing a few people in as long as the powers that be get to keep it. They don't mind who like, as long as people, like, you know, are okay with them keeping power. Yeah. And that's right, Reading Rap. And that's the problem. You think all of a sudden, like, then the conspiracy theorists, because they're shitty things, like, it must be a conspiracy. It's like, no, there's not a whole lot. Life is fair and the winners are the cheers of the game. If you play by the rules, you're getting screwed. A lot of times, yeah, for the most part. That doesn't mean you're going to have a shitty life if you just have, like, you know, a non-crazy life. You, like, keep saying, it's not a bad place to live around here. It's very expensive, but like in the at least in my area, but in the United States, you can have a very nice life. Like you can have a decent job, live in like a clean area. Like, I mean, clean water, not everywhere. Don't live in Flint, Michigan, but like you have like clean water, like halfway decent, like place to live, decent job. Like it's, you may not be a billionaire, but like you may have a very nice life too. Like it's not all bad. Okay. Yeah, we're getting down to the end of this. This is the end of this last page here. What happened to the clean water in Michigan? I don't know if it's clean yet. The politicians decided that they didn't want to pay for like the water treatment plant, so they started diverting water from a river, which happened to be lead poisoned. And then a whole generation of people in Flint, Michigan, which is like, of course, the poor African American neighborhood, and there got, you know, lead poisoning, and it was bad. Hey, Frank, what's going on? Conspiracy implies intent, but if simply that a political elite with an uneducated populace is stable, then things stay that way regardless of individual intents. Yeah, but that's powers that be. And like, the idea that like uneducated populace is uneducated because they just started out that way and they are that way for no good reason. It's like, really? How did the powers that be get there and then like the people underneath just be uneducated? That seems like a very convenient thing for the people in charge. Globus, I think Zeta's from Italy, so Zeta may not know exactly what happens here in the United States. So it's like it may be just legit not up on like the idiocy that happens in the United States on Zeta's part. Okay. Yeah, I think we've just got a miscommunication there. That's fine. It happens. All right. Still, for most of us, such reprisal must be stochastic or actuarial. Okay, so now we're talking about like random or like actually planned. MDD says teachers have noticed a strong decline in literacy rate and general critical thinking in the young ones. Yeah, well, I think that's definitely part of society at the moment. Like maybe social media's in effect. Also, education has not kept up. How did things get that way? I'm not sure, but things have been like that for thousands of years. I'm not so sure things have been like that. Like things have been like that for thousands of years, Frank, but not in like every single spot. Like the powers that be, like whoever's in control, yeah, you might have a country there for a few hundred years, but things like change after a few hundred years. Like you're in Shane Stream, civilizations come and go at the, you know, somewhat regularly every few hundred years. So it's like, why do, like, some people have money, some people don't? It's like, there was a reason there. Like, there was. So it has been that way, but like in any given situation, you can look at what happened. Yeah. Okay. What remains unacceptable is the targeting of individual civilians. Yeah, see, this is weird. You just have to find some way to give yourself a little protection so you're not targeting specific ones. That's one of the weird things here. What is acceptable is reprisable with the statistical certainty that a given percentage of civilians must be killed thereby. We should return to the time of the Roman Empire, rape, violence, and conquest, that civilization. Yeah, like, things were not, like, better in the past. Yeah. The structural issues go beyond the rules. They extend to neighborhoods, how they're over-policed and underfunded, which leads to underfunded schools and broken homes, perpetuates the cycle. Yeah. Like, it's complicated, but yeah. I mean, Map says, where I'm right, socioeconomic stability can be maintained through systemic factors without a deliberate plan to oppress. Historical patterns often show stability through power structures. Yeah, that's better said than I said. So, yeah. Well, just because Americans are racist in Darius, like, they were angry that the black people were being uppity and asking not to get shot. Like, or, like, get their neck stepped on. Like, oh my God. Like, please don't kill us. You guys are being uppity for asking us not to kill you. Come on. Where it's wrong, while stability might exist, it doesn't necessarily justify or make the system morally right. Well, of course, yeah. Inequality and lack of education can lead to societal issues. Additionally, attributing the state of affairs to thousands of years over the policy. Yeah, it's meant Frank. Yeah. Okay, so me and Reed Map are agreeing there. MD said the neoliberal stronghold and political economy ended in mainstream consciousness in 2016 with Trump winning the election, and political science in 2008 when the financial crisis happened and banks were bailed out by tax dollars. I think people are scrambling now on what to do with it. Yeah, MDD, I'm with you on that. I think that basically a lot of like what people had like thought, oh, these people knew what they were talking about, is out the window at this point. I don't feel like, maybe it was just my ignorance back then, but I really don't feel like any of the current, like, oh, this is what's going on. Like, they have no fucking clue. When they had to do all these bailouts and then, like, the political troubles here in the U.S., like, it really, I don't feel like any of the theorists, they know stuff, but, like, any big ideas what's happening, we won't know till later. Yeah. Okay, so we're explaining what is going on in the U.S., sure. Yeah, Tindarius, but like it just was. Like, unfortunately, it just was. The Black Lives Matter is just saying, look, you can't kill black people. That was the whole point of the Black Lives Matter. You just can't kill us indiscriminately. That's all it was like meant to say, or at least some of it. I'm not an expert on this, but like that was enough to piss people off. Like, oh my God, how dare you say that? Like, the Black Lives Matter. You can't kill you anymore. Yeah. I mean, Zeta's right about that. Like, the all lives matter pisses us off because it's saying, look, oh, well, you're ignoring that the black people were having it worse than other people. It's like, they shouldn't be getting killed. They should not be getting killed. They should not be getting killed. Period. Okay. All right, so in the final analysis, those of us who would accept the air war say that under certain conditions it may be necessary to burn babies. There we go. Necessary. Even if we are not explicitly targeting babies, we are all familiar enough with the statistics to know that our historically mediated choice will kill those whom no theory of society at war can plausibly claim to have opted for war. Vengeance is mine, supposedly saith the Lord. Vengeance, though, is also ours, including civilian deaths as long as the victims are not personally selected. This remains curious. Why is it more acceptable that, say, 5% of a city of 500,000 will be killed, that's 25,000, so long as we do not specify which 5%, whereas shooting 50 hostages out of hand is unacceptable? Nonetheless, it is. Yeah. Do we have anything? Alright, so we have you have people on the right being like, neoliberal dream was a farce because it required compromising our values. People on the left being like, see, Marx's critique of capitalism unsustainability was correct, but how do we move past it? And neoliberals is often paired with corporate Democrats trying hard to hold the two sides together. Yeah, and that's a fucking mess, isn't it, MDD? That's bad. Yeah, so why is it okay if we didn't know which ones were gonna die? It's like, who do we get to play, like, Hand of God or like, Lightning Strike? Who gets to die? Like, I don't know. But they say, nonetheless, it is okay. Or we've at least accepted that it is. We're okay with stochastic random deaths. The issue is not quite that of randomness, for the terrorist does not know which teenagers will, for instance, be discoing in the Jerusalem Cafe. Wow, look at you with the author with like the hitting the contemporary news. Or who will already be at work in the World Trade Center. He or she inflicts death as in a lottery. Is distance the issue? Is whoever kills us close up deemed more morally responsible than he who slays from far away? No matter what the source of these scruples, and whether due to bombing, blockade, radiation, or the like, the unspecified death is more acceptable than the specified death. I read a paper a million years ago on Philosophy Roulette saying, is this sort of like out of sight, out of mind actually? What does that do? And so there is discussion about this. But like it's a discussion unto itself. Yeah, but Zeta, you're asking idiots to go learn history. So yeah, this paper's 2005. That's right. Yes, thank you. This is a 2005 paper. Furetius asked because he was asking about like ethics and World War II. So this is a 2000 paper on World War II bombings. So yeah. Okay. But is it more ethically acceptable to treat life and death as a lottery than to inflict death on specified groups of people? And why is it more acceptable to condone as a means of warfare the heavy bombing of cities and towns with the statistical certainty of innocent victims, but to condemn the terrorism that purposefully, I can't speak anymore, kills innocent civilians as a pawn in a political response? Yeah. There are two possible answers, and neither is very satisfactory. Terrorism is specifically intended to kill innocents. In city bombing, their death is merely accepted. Okay, so that's the old, like just letting them die versus like killing them specifically. The historian, of course, is not an ethicist, but how robust a distinction does this really amount to? The second is that evil regimes hold their own citizens hostage and are responsible for the death of innocents as those who seek to defeat them. The Germans started the war, or their Führer did. Well, this sounds good, but it doesn't diminish the complicity of the bombers. Well, go check out, you can go check out the stream, Globus' stream if you want. I don't think Globus is stopped seeing anybody at all. Yeah, Globus got some good takes, so that's cool. All right. Well, this sounds good, but it doesn't diminish the complicity of the bombers. At what age does one become a Nazi or even a supporter? Surely not younger than 4, 5, or 6, or whatever. Readers expect historians legitimately, I think, to take a surrogate responsibility for approval or disapproval of their protagonist's hard choices. To say that Friedrich's fire is flawed by lack of balance or inflammatory language cannot get us off the hook. As good liberals, we might plausibly argue that our statesmen and pilots could have killed fewer babies or non-combatants, and probably that is where most of us are left after reading his book. Yet at the end, I am nevertheless forced to confront inconsistencies and beliefs that I would rather avoid. Jus in bello remains at best an asymptotic guideline, never fully to be achieved, often to be hypocritically violated. But what other choice do we have? Oh. Okay, so this is a history paper. This is not a philosophy paper. And so you get to, at the end, be like, I don't know. They even claimed right here that this person's a historian. The historian, of course, is not an ethicist. They're not going to make an ethical claim. They're just laying out the historical, but they're laying out an ethical problem here. Is it okay? What makes it okay that we're makes it better if we think we're not specifically targeting individuals? When is it okay to just target like a city that is comprised of civilians and we're going to blow up civilians, but we are not targeting them specifically? So yeah, 6-minute read. Well, I had no idea why they thought this was a 6-minute read, but like I knew it wasn't, because I knew it was like 16 pages, but like there was a speed reader. You have to throw 50 flyers away. There's some probably mentally... Okay, so but now we are here and we can do a review. And everyone that has not seen it yet, I now have a vote meh. So you can vote meh if you think this is a meh. But as always, feel free, if this paper you think made your brain dance, like it was a fun thing, gave you some fun ideas to talk about, you can type in brain dance. If you think it had big claims that shriveled up, then you go with the grapes. If it was navel gazing only for academics, nog navel, or Ouroboros for deep ancient ideas. I mean, this was a not like a philosophy paper, so it's not talking about deep ancient ideas, but it did hit the ethical points. The scream for existential artistic drama, and maybe nog turd if it's all style no substance, and nog knife for slicing and dicing arguments. Viper says, I recall reading that the Albuquerque police conducted a no-knock raid deploying flashbangs to disorientate the suspect. The problem was they got the wrong house and flashbang ignited something, burning the place down with a 14-year-old boy in it. Yeah, I remember that. That happened. I think we demarcate things more by intent. While conducting policing, people might die. While conducting war, people might die. While commuting, people might die. Yeah. Ivan says, meh, mostly a historical review, but I don't think I got any new insight. Okay, that's fair. I mean, the only thing was this one bit at the end is the question of why is stochastic killing worse than the intentful killing? Or not? We think it's not as bad as the intentful killing. If we pick out 50 people to shoot, that seems worse than killing 50 people when we were bombing the city. Is it worse? Maybe it isn't. Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. Tenderos. Yeah, so I mean, that's fair. This is not a philosophy paper, so we're not arguing about like the person's position. They were merely laying out the historical problem and raising the issue that like we have not like historically decided. Because apparently, according to this author in 2005, this was only just being broached as a historical problem. The fact that we were burning civilians in German cities, and as like, well, we have to take out their infrastructure, sort of thing. Okay, so what am I going to say? You know, I thought this was a little bit of fun. So I'm going to give it a brain dance because why not? Let's see, what else to give it? Globus says, yeah, I think these are things bear always and keep in mind civilians already suffering war. Yeah, I think as a history paper, they did a good enough job. They kind of knew their limits here. And so, like, the idea that they knew their limits and didn't overdo the ethical stuff, and they were able to delineate an ethical question that they weren't going to try to touch. They did at certain times get very close to a consequentialist position, like, well, we have to, like, at the very end, like, what else are we get? What other choice do we have when we're like existentially threatened except to kill everybody? But like, they did not. I think they were careful enough not to muddy the water too much. Yeah. So I think I'll give it a vote yay as well, just because. This is a history paper, but like if you want to read about this sort of thing, I think it did a good enough idea of laying out the thing. And it's like, I know I'm giving like a sliding scale on this one. This is a bit of a sliding scale. Like I do this sometimes with public philosophy, like when we read like short papers that are meant for like the general audience, not professional philosophers. I kind of rate them a little lighter. I'm giving this one also a little bit of a sliding scale also. So, yeah. But anyone in chat, there's a bunch of you here. If you want to give a review, you just type in the name of the emote, and you can see what the emotes are. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll leave it up for a while. Yeah. Cost-benefit analysis, pure and simple. When cars were first introduced, there was an outcry because people died on the roads. Now, with faster, more numerous cars, exponentially more people die, but we accepted because the benefits are so great, we ignore the collateral damage. Yeah. Adam, what's up? You missed the episode. Yeah, we were talking about just war theory, and in this case, what allows us to accept the fact when we bomb cities, like indiscriminate bombings, we're going to kill innocent civilians and kids. What do I do for work? If you don't mind me asking, I work for a non-profit. I mostly pay bills. I do paperwork. It's a lot of bullshit. I pay bills. I do paperwork. And I have the job because they let me basically do what I want. Like if I want to change something in my schedule, I do. The Doctor of Total War is adherence. I remain unconvinced. Yeah. Well, again, this was like I'm being nicer to this person, like, because they're not a philosopher. Like, I was angry at Heidegger last episode because he should have had a stronger conclusion. Even though I love his argumentation, his argumentation fell flat at the end, and it was like, this person gets more leeway than Heidegger does, because Heidegger knows better than to have a shitty conclusion to his paper. Although I'm seriously considering revising it, because the rest of the paper was good. It just had a shitty end. I shouldn't have been so angry with it either. Zeta says capitalism needs to survive. People without jobs, those who do jobs, can be threatened by their bosses. Yeah, I mean, yeah, blackmail, basically starvation waves. Yeah, this is one of the problems with capitalism, is that it basically wants to force people to work when they don't want to. Yeah. Yeah, especially the military. And that's one, people are afraid that when lives get too well, they won't be able to have a military in this country anymore, because people won't want to die when you could just get a better job. Yeah. And what moral sense allows us to be killers? Well, if you have to go to war, Adam, like, you have to go to war. Like, this is about World War II. If you have to go to war because, the Nazis are taking over the world, and you're like, no, we don't want the Nazis to take over the world, well, then you have to decide, what are we allowed to do to stop them at a certain point? Like, is there a step too far that you can't take, that you're going to, like, well, we can't bomb the cities because that's just wrong, so then you have to find some other way. And if you can't think of another way to stop the Nazis, like, well, whose failing is that? Are you just going to let the Nazis trample you, or should you just start randomly bombing their cities, and in the hopes of killing everybody, like we did when we just bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima out of existence, because we just don't want to deal with this anymore, because we just kill everybody because that's a solution? Well, maybe that's not a good solution. But, like, that's the question. If you are really afraid that everyone on your side is going to die, what do you do? What do you think makes a philosopher's name stand the test of time? Is it simple novelty? I mean, you could ask, I guess, the same question of a poet. Like, is it just the poetry, like the novelty of the poetry, that makes it stand the test of time? Maybe. Like, maybe something is so novel that it doesn't. But usually in philosophy, you are trying to talk about something, beauty, truth, one of these big ideas. And, like, that, the meanings of those things shift over time too. So, like, there may not be any stable thing. Usually in philosophy, there's supposedly something more than novelty. I mean, I always say I'm not always on the side of truth here. I don't find it to be the most interesting topic. So it's like, I'm always wondering, like, what's interesting nowadays? Like, what are the interesting problems? And so if you can ask questions that are not going to be answered, for, like, if you can ask harder questions that, like if you could cause, like, people to be worrying about what the fuck you were talking about, the questions you were worried about, that's what lasts. Like, the liar paradox is mentioned in the New Testament. It's a 2,000-year-old problem. Why is it, like, so confusing when I say I'm lying right now? Like, that's not having to do with novelty. That has more. It's more than novelty. So yeah. Yeah. So it's more than novelty. You have to get some problem that if it was just novelty, you wouldn't necessarily be a philosopher. You could also be a poet. You could be like a writer or something. I mean, all science is going after novelty too. You're looking at novel scientific phenomena. So, like, why is Einstein remembered and, like, Joe Schmo, not remembered? I don't know. But, like, it's not just novelty. It sort of has to do more than just be different. The novel tea. Tea, yes. Very good tea. I like tea. I've been drinking more tea again. I drink a lot. I was drinking a lot of coffee, and I'm replacing it with some tea again. So I'm not drinking as much coffee. I've got some more tea. All right. So anyone want to get some reviews in, please do. Like I said, you can. These are the emotes, and feel free to use them as you see fit. Yeah, I'm going to revise my Heidegger review. I'm going to take off my vote nay. I think it was an okay essay, and I feel like I scaled up my review for Heidegger. I wouldn't have been hard on for a paper from 1938. Like, it wasn't so bad. I'm lying because I'm a philosopher. Yeah, maybe. And Ivan's angry. If one too obscure and don't engage with the community, you're more likely to be overlooked. Yeah, that's fair. Like, if you're just being obscurantist, or you're really being like an ecstatic, like sort of like one of these, mystical thinkers, that would be considered novelty. But is it like, you'd have to really say something that no other mystical thinker said, otherwise it wouldn't be novel. Yeah, I do worry about scaling my reviews. Like, I want it to be somewhat consistent, and I do grade certain things harder than other things. Heidegger's not going to come after me for an A. No. I mean, you might. Okay, last, I've been thinking I should get a timer on this, but like last minute. And if he does, the force is justified. Okay. Okay, we've got some miscommunications here about what we were talking about. But all right, vote, and Tinderos drops the meh.